Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Anthony was always a man of integrity and fairness. More than anything else, he valued loyalty. Loyalty to people, loyalty to his favorite business, loyalty to his own principles. After earning his first big money and opening a security agency, Anthony realized that truly loyal people are disastrously few. Once loyal partners betrayed him, smelling even more money elsewhere, and former enemies smiled falsely in the face when they realized that Anthony is now really rich. Even his beloved wife once betrayed the man on one of the most ordinary days. Anthony, unexpectedly returning from a business trip, caught his wife with another man, caught in her own bed. He found her in a way he'd never seen his modest wife before. But the betrayed husband is a soft, cordial, and straightforward man. After a while, he forgave the unfaithful one. His wife, Kelly, was once an orphan and a stranger. Throw her out of the house, she'd have nowhere to go. Anthony managed to find the strength to forgive the woman he once loved, or to forgive her only in words. In any case, it remained a mystery to everyone. However, since that day, the couple's life had changed markedly. No longer could he look into the eyes of his Kelly. No longer could he trust anyone. Since that day, he devoted his life to a new friend, or rather, a dog named Remy. The Cocker Spaniel dog became more than just a pet. He became his loyal friend. The kind of friend he never dreamed of. Anthony. He became his companion. He became his companion. Remy brought together all the qualities that Anthony so desperately tried to find in people. He tried to find loyalty in his friends, in his business partners, in his relatives, in his wife. Who would have thought that all the immense love and loyalty that a man who was already not old enough to dream so much about, he would be able to find in a dog from day one? Taking time out of the kennel, Anthony realized it was fate. From the moment Kelly cheated on her husband, he couldn't even look in her direction in peace, nor could he divorce her. After all, she begged him not to kick her out, and he decided to move to different parts of their large country house. The space allowed. And now Anthony had only one love, one affection, his faithful spaniel Remy. He was not only the man's best friend, he was his ally. Remy made a great hunter, and Anthony had been interested in hunting since he was a child. After all, both his father and even his grandfather were passionate about the hobby. And so the next 12 years passed in love and understanding. Anthony had already retired, but every hunting season he and Remy met in full readiness. Ronca was an obedient, loyal dog. He knew many commands. He picked up waltz, spikes, and partridges the first time. He immediately found game and brought it to his beloved master. The last 12 years were the best years of Anthony's life. After all, they had passed together with those a lonely terror rolled down the old man's cheek. "You were my best friend," Anthony said quietly, hardly restraining himself from bursting into tears. "You were my friend, you were my family." He turned away from the small bundle in which the already dead old Remy lay, no longer able to look at his departed friend. There was a lump in his throat. He felt dizzy. "How will I be without you?" he asked quietly. "Ah, it's just a dog." Anthony squeamishly wrinkled Kelly's nose. They buried it as if it were a human being. "Wake up, it's just a dog." She continued to resent it. "You should have loved your wife like that, Anthony." Didn't even turn his head toward his wife. "Get out," he said sternly. "I'm not going anywhere." She continued to resent him. "I want to know what kind of circus you're running here, for God's sake." The older man simply repeated what he had said earlier. "Come out a little louder," he said. "You're not worth half of my Remy. Without making a sin of it, let's just leave the funeral." Kelly rolled her eyes demonstratively. "You're welcome," she shouted and took a quick step toward the exit of the small cemetery where pets were buried in this expensive village. "Kitty goss," she lamented to herself, all dancing to his tune while he went crazy. "I wish someone would tell him it's not normal," she thought. Kelly was a solid, well-fed woman. She had met Anthony when she was 25 and he was 28. It probably couldn't be said that Kelly had ever really loved her husband. She probably didn't know how to love at all. After moving to the big city and having nothing but good looks, Kelly went looking for a wealthy man, looking for someone who could provide for her life. Kelly grew up in an orphanage. She grew up in horrible, even inhumane conditions. Maybe that's why she didn't know how to love. Maybe that's why she only saw people as tools for her own ends. Maybe she did, or maybe it was just because she was such a cold, calculating person, devoid of empathy. When Kelly reached adulthood, she sold the room in the communal apartment that she had gotten from the state and immediately invested all the money in her appearance, moving to the big city. Kelly began to search for a husband rich and successful. From 18 to 25, Kelly changed a lot of men, but all of them were not what she wanted. It wasn't until she met Anthony that she realized this was the one for her. Initially, Kelly had a very different goal in mind. A young businessman, owner of a decent business, immediately attracted her attention, and Kelly was already beginning to generalize him. Then his personal security guard caught her eye. Strong, a little clumsy, but very kind guard Anthony. The girl immediately realized this man was a gold mine. Being a calculating person, Kelly was able to see the potential in the guard. She saw immediately this man will succeed, and leaving attempts to generalize the businessman, engaged in his guard Anthony. Kelly had a special gift, namely she was able to easily read the personality of other people and easily copy their behavior, thereby enticing her prey. "Oh, you're a security guard? I love hunting," she said, naively batting her eyes on the first date. "My dream is to marry a hunter. The thick, wild woods. The smell of gunpowder, fresh, hand-caught meat. How I love it all," she said. No wonder Anthony, though in those years he was still just Anthony, fell in love with the young and beautiful Kelly. Thinking she was his destiny, the couple married 6 months after meeting. And 3 years later, Anthony opened his own security firm. Kelly got what she wanted. She became the wife of a rich and successful man. True, from his hobbies and interests, she was literally sick of it. She hated nature, giving her preference to city life, hated long hikes, hated sleeping in tents, hated dogs and birds. She didn't like animals in general. Basically, she hated everything she loved so much. Her husband. However, divorce was out of the question. For the fortune hunter's main goal was not just a rich husband. Her main goal was an inheritance. Kelly hoped that sooner or later Anthony would die. She dreamed of how the unloved spouse accidentally shot on the hunt, and his business and real estate will go to her. She dreamed of an inheritance. But Anthony had no intention of giving his soul to God. So the day Kelly was caught cheating, she fell at her husband's feet, begging him not to leave her. After all, she didn't just have nowhere to go, and was desperately sorry for all the long years she had wasted on Anthony. Anthony forgave his wife, but stopped sleeping in the same bed with her, and for the next 12 years, the couple hardly spoke to each other, only occasionally crossing paths within the walls of the new family member's big house. Kelly hated it with every fiber of her dark soul. After all, it was Remy who now lived in her bedroom. It was Remy who shared a bed with Anthony. It was Remy who had gotten the best benefits. It was Remy who had invested so much time and money, while Kelly was living in her house as a live-in, not a full-time wife anymore. Yes, Anthony did not kick her out of the house, but he had lost all interest and, most importantly, respect for her. No longer did he look at her with a loving gaze. No longer did he adore his wife. She often wondered if the affair had been worth what her life had become. Cheating, of course, had no answer to that question. In fact, she had been unfaithful to Anthony since the first year of their marriage. Who knew that on that day her spouse would return on time from a business trip? The sense of shame had never entered this woman's soul. It was basically inaccessible to her. Kelly rather lived by instinct. A sense of pleasure in satisfying her needs, a sense of self-importance. That's all. The 3 pillars of her personality. Compassion, love, loyalty. All of those things were nothing to her. All Kelly had to do now was wait in silence for Anthony to leave this world and inherit his legacy. But the man seemed to grow stronger every day. "Idiots, idiots," half-voicedly scolded the predator. Sitting behind the wheel of the SUV, she was heading toward home and could not understand how anyone could run around with a simple dog like that. She couldn't understand why her husband bought expensive toys for the dog. Why he had built a whole enclosure for some dog? It's a dog. He belongs on a leash outside the house. She was indignant as Anthony poured a bowl of clean water for Remy. Let him eat the snow. This attitude toward a simple dog, though quite expensive, was alien and hateful to her. And after Remy's death, when she saw that Anthony was going to give the dog a real funeral, it was beyond her comprehension. What nonsense! She thought with all her might, pushing the gas pedal part of the way down the deserted highway that ran through the dense forest. How much do I hate all this? Meanwhile, the funeral was coming to an end, and the small coffin was already being lowered into the ground. Anthony, though he did not show it, was depressed as he had never been depressed in his life. His soul was torn. His heart ached with longing. Even the day he had learned that his spouse had been unfaithful to him, he had not been in such pain. Though he died his death of old age, the pain of his loss didn't get any weaker. The pain of losing his best friend. That's what the unfortunate man felt. He seemed to be in a delirium. The whole world was a hazy, foggy blur, and he couldn't be in that world all alone. When the coffin was lowered, the workers had already begun to bury the grave. A strong male hand rested on Anthony's shoulder. "I'm sorry," quietly said a man who approached unnoticed. It was Benjamin, a hunter with whom Anthony often went into the field and a good acquaintance. Benjamin, like his companion, loved dogs. He also had his own dog kennel. Benjamin was involved in breeding one of the most beautiful hunting breeds, the Red Irish Setter. His simple hobby and love for dogs led him to his life's work. His kennel was considered one of the. In the country, the pedigree of his dog went far back to the origins of this breed. The dogs from his kennel were true role models. Invariably took prizes at exhibitions and field trials, those who wanted to buy a faithful friend. He had so many that the owner of the kennel chose the buyers himself, conducting tests and various checks. Benjamin was one of the few people Anthony wanted to see at his Remy's funeral. Many of those who attended such an unusual event were surprised, to say the least. Many did not understand the motives of the unrestrained man. Why bury the dog at all? Thought an elderly woman housekeeper living at Anthony's house. They could have just buried it in the woods. The young workers at the security agency owned by Anthony were also surprised. They shifted from foot to foot, embarrassed by the superior's universal sadness. Only fellow hunters, including Benjamin, could understand the unhappy owner. Benjamin cleared his throat. "I understand how much it hurts," he said, still keeping his hand on the hunter's shoulder. "Hold on, thank you," Anthony replied melancholically. "Thank you for coming. Never mind." He waved away, about to leave the small graveyard, as suddenly his companion squeezed his shoulder tighter. "Tell me, Anthony, do you need to talk?" he said with pressure. "The main thing is not to worry about the wife of the woman they know. I have not worried about her for a long time." Just as quietly answered Anthony, stopping to continue the conversation. "It's just that I feel something, that longing. Hopelessness. Not just that." The man smiled indignantly. "When Remy was gone, I felt my life go with him. I know fading away. I can't explain it. Even before I knew for sure that Remy was no longer alive, I felt something so strange, as if my heart had lost something important, as if something had chipped away from it, leaving this world. I feel like I'm only dying after Remy." Anthony's buddy's eyes went wide. "Anthony, come on. It's the pain, the loss. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about." He was embarrassed, adjusting his shirt. "You're not dying, brother. You're gonna be okay. I don't need pity," Anthony replied grimly. "I shared with you how I feel without Remy. I don't see the point of living without him anymore. Oh, how I am without him." Tears froze in his eyes and orphaned him. The man quickly turned away from his interlocutor. He felt that if anyone saw his weakness, it would damage his reputation, bringing him into disrepute. "My dog was a loyal companion. There's no one else like him." "You need a new dog," Benjamin said, nodding his head reassuringly. "Yes, that's right. A loyal, faithful dog. By the way, I have a new addition to my kennel very soon. Many puppies are already booked, but for you, I think I'll single out a male or a female. Which one do you want? One of ours. A bitch is pregnant. She's about to breed. Anthony shook his head at that puppy. He's not gonna be my Remy. No one can ever replace him for me. No offense, brother, think about it. I know what I'm talking about. We're dog people, can't do without our four-legged friends. Benjamin smiled and shook his buddy's hand firmly and left the pet cemetery. Puppy said the word to the man to himself and thought for a moment. A moose pecked at his face. A faint smile. A hand clenched into a fist. Sleep well, my boy, pronounced Anthony, looking at the fresh grave of his dog. Goga motherfucker, you're kidding me, shouted Kelly, 2 months later, not choosing his expression. Another dog. Why? Anthony seemed not to hear his wife, for all his attention was focused on the puppy. A month and a half after Remy's death, Anthony, after careful thought, decided to get another dog. Every day after the funeral, he felt worse and worse. It was as if the once active man was getting older and older. Every day he lost all interest in life. The colors of the world became more and more pleasant and colorless. It seemed to him that he was ready to die. Trying to find the will to live him, and an important decision was made. Puppies to be called Benjamin and arranged for a viewing. Anthony arrived at the kennel of his dog. He saw immediately a very young puppy. It was only 3 weeks old. The unsightly and clumsy puppy had only just opened his eyes and did not know how to do anything at all. According to the kennel's rules, you could only buy a dog when the puppy was at least 3 months old. However, Benjamin knew his mate well. He could be trusted. After another 2 weeks, Anthony Pavlovich was already driving home from his friend, and a new family member was sitting in the back. The puppies had already had all the necessary vaccinations, kennel branding, and even the passport was ready. A little red-haired Irish setter named Mario was now to be Anthony's new best friend. Anthony, damn you. Who the hell am I talking to? The woman continued to be indignant. What the hell is this? Why do you need another dog? The grown and solid man sat up straight on the floor like a small child playing with a puppy. Little Rio wagged his dainty tail merrily and fidgeted in one place as if he were a doll. Anthony laughed, looking the doggy over with a wide people palm. He muttered, "Do you know what his full name is? Who are you talking to?" The lady asked irritably, rubbing her nose. "Do you look like a matman?" "Rio de Janeiro." Anthony laughed, continuing to rub his furry friend behind the ear. "Anthony, what do you want from me?" "Woman." Finally, he turned his attention to his wife. "You got a problem with that. Nobody's keeping you here." Emotionless, he said. Kelly immediately turned from anger to grace. She spoke affectionately. She held out her hand. "How could I be without you? Why are you sulking?" Anthony roughly turned around from his annoying spouse. He got to his feet, taking the puppy under his arm. "Without me," he interjected. "Yeah, I think you'll be fine without a problem." He was about to leave the living room where he had been playing with the puppy, but Kelly blocked his way, not letting him pass. "What are you talking about?" she asked in a thin, high-pitched voice. "You're the love of my life. I've given you all of me." She looked into his eyes as she usually did when waiting. Of course, the cunning woman was lying, as it was already mentioned. The feeling of love, warmth, care for someone other than herself was unavailable to her. It seemed that she was not a woman at all, but just a biological shell, a pretty shell, even at a very advanced age, devoid of feelings, but good at manipulation. "Anthony, I gave you my whole life. I'm not a boy to fall for your flirtations." He turned on his heels and sat down on the couch, putting the dog beside him. "I don't know why you didn't leave then. But remember, I wouldn't mind if you left right now. But how dare you?" She sighed theatrically, clutching her chest. "Oh, heart, aren't you ashamed of driving me to it? I love you, that man, that betrayal. It was a mistake, stupid and insignificant. I've never loved anyone the way I love you." "Lies," exclaimed the infatuated hunter. "You love no one. How can you not be ashamed?" Continue to play on the feelings of the spouse. "It is after all that I have experienced. I have loved you all my life." She paused meaningfully. And besides, where would I go? You know I'm all alone in this world. I have only you and no relatives or friends. But that's nonsense too, Anthony answered her. Couldn't you have gone to that lover? Don't lecture me. He did. I guess I should have divorced you then. I took pity on the poor orphan, and I loved you. The man closed his eyes, tilts his head. Little Rio continued to watch his master attentively, waiting to continue their merry game. Anthony, on the other hand, quietly spoke, Kelly, go mind your own business and leave us alone. I loved you and I love you now. Kelly snuggled up to her husband, sitting down next to him. But why do you need that dog? You have me. And God forbid something happens to you, and what happens to that dog? That's what you were thinking about at the time. I'm not going to be with him. I'm not going hunting. Anthony, well, let's get him back before it's too late. But what are you missing? Anthony opened his eyes sharply from the curve. Surprised, he asked, do you even know how much that dog is worth? His pedigree, his kennel, his breed, after all. It's all very expensive. And what does that mean? If something happens to you? Kelly, I'm only a couple years older than you. I don't care how much it costs. I don't care if there's a mutt sleeping in your bed outside the store. Don't you dare, quietly said the man Boyles. I'm sorry. Kelly smiled charmingly. Well, why do you need him? Let's get him back. Kelly, get off, roughly answered the man, notwithstanding the pressure of his wife. None of your business. I already told you, if you don't like it, you don't belong here. I'll do what I want. He was silent for a while, daring to say the following. You haven't given me any children. Do you have to love someone? Kelly, shocked by her husband's words, suddenly jumped up from her seat. Oh, and that's after all that I've been through. And for a couple of seconds, he hurled a stern look at his interlocutor, then ran out of the living room. Oh shit, the man Kelly cursed. He jumped up and sternly told Rio to wait and followed her leisurely. In the 5th year of their marriage, Anthony began to insist on children. He could not understand why his beloved wife kept refusing. At first, she said that they should live longer in marriage and get to know each other better. But now they had been together for 5 years. Then she said they needed more money to have a child. Anthony ramped up his successful business. Then she said that times are not the same now, and a fortune teller told her that she can't have a baby until she's 35. In general, she refused as much as she could at the moment, when she realized that Anthony would not give up, and if she didn't give birth, he might leave her for someone else. Kelly decided it was time to agree, at least in words. She solemnly announced to her husband that she was ready for children, and the couple began to try to have children. At first, Kelly was sneaky. She took birth control pills in secret from her husband. However, such deception was quickly exposed when once he saw accidentally these pills in her bedside table, as from being made a scoundrel, realized it is necessary to act more radically. Then she finally allowed herself to get pregnant, and drinking the special drug, set up everything so that she had a miscarriage. Of course, Kelly didn't want children. She just didn't want them. She hated them. She realized that she could never love a child, just as she could never love anyone in her whole life. Kelly, sacrificing her own health and the new life that had managed to bud inside her, had faked a miscarriage. To achieve her own goals, she was not spared anything. But what was the result? Allegedly having learned about the miscarriage, Kelly made a real show, wringing her hands, sobbing at the top of her voice, howling, tearing her hair out, never again, screaming her heart out, I'll never do it again. Basically, she did everything she could to make the impressionable Anthony regret cheating and bury the thought of one day becoming a father. She manipulated her spouse as if he were her rag doll. This is how she once again managed to deceive the only man who truly loved her. Kelly, I'm sorry. Out of breath, Anthony said, catching up with his spouse in her bedroom. I'm sorry you miscarried. I wasn't thinking. Of course you didn't. She theatrically put her hand to her forehead. You weren't the one who lost the baby. You dare remind me of the agony, if not the pain. How could you, Kelly? The man moved closer to his wife and hesitantly pulled her into his arms. He couldn't remember the last time he had hugged his wife. Well, I'm sorry to remind you, but it was my baby too. I've been through the same thing you have. Of course you have, she said indignantly, leaning into her husband's shoulder and smiling victoriously when he couldn't see her face. It wasn't you who bore him, not you. Well, I'm sorry, once again the man said. At the same time, Kelly began sobbing loudly, mimicking a cry. Hunter squeezed his spouse a little harder in his embrace. Kelly, on the other hand, smiled predatorily, knowing that he could not see her face. Idiot, she thought to herself, rejoicing at how lucky her husband was to be burning once again. She continued to sob loudly and desperately, until the following happened. Anthony suddenly in his wife's arms, grabbing her by the heart, and he cried out his heart. The paramedic took the couple wide steps back. What? What's the matter with you? Desperately she shouted, pictorially clasping her hands and in the heart of vengeful joy, anticipating the subsequent events. My heart was wheezing. The man having already fallen to his knees and collapsed on his side. To me, the doctor in a quiet, frightening whisper said he heart. Kelly, frightened actually by this terrifying and painful scene, rushed to the phone, as suddenly stopped abruptly. She looked around, remembering which of the servants were at home today. It was the housekeeper's day off, she said. Quietly, thinking aloud, the cleaning lady won't be in until tomorrow. She suddenly smiled broadly. We're all alone in the house. Kelly. Anthony was already losing consciousness, but was still holding on to life. With a last effort of "Will you ambulance?" as hoarsely he squeezed out. Like hell I did, she replied, smiling wryly. Who can prove that I saw you lose? And I can't wait any longer, I'm sick of you. All I want is your inheritance. She laughed wickedly. And you wrote my will to someone else, didn't you? Yes, and to whom she would have grinned, she added. You have no one else but that dog. Everything will go to me at last. Anthony, realizing that he was dying, gathered the last of his strength and quietly answered deceitfully. So that's what it turns out to be. Your inheritance is ready. Rio. That's when Anthony let go of the spirit and the name of the red puppy. It was still on his lips. Kelly and the new Chalol along the deserted forest road. Upbeat music could be heard from the speakers. A bloodthirsty smile froze on the criminal's face. She was wearing wide sunglasses. A black silk scarf was tied on her head. The woman couldn't believe her happiness. Finally, for so many years I have waited for this moment. For so many years I thought it was a crazy lady. And she was reading to us on the highway practicing a complicated speech. Her husband had finally died. Died in her arms. And in fact, she's the one who finished him off. She's the one who didn't call an ambulance. She gave him a heart attack with her tears and tantrums about the child she killed. The cause of death turned out to be just such a massive heart attack. Of course, if help had been rendered in time, Anthony could have been saved. But that was not part of Laura's devious plans. And now that Anthony's funeral was settled, it was time to do what Kelly had dreamed of all the years of their marriage. It was time to deal with the inheritance. She drove to the notary, rehearsing how she would sob uncontrollably, playing on the pity of those around her. She was already approaching the appointed place when she suddenly remembered that she wasn't entirely alone in the car. Right, she exclaimed. She braked sharply. There was a sharp squeal of brakes, and Kelly swerved off the highway, stopping on the side of the road at the fork in the road. She turned around to the back seat. You hissed, she hissed, pointing a finger with a long purple nail at the small, puzzled huff of this puppy. The doggy tilted his head to the side, of course not understanding what was going on after his owner disappeared to an unknown destination. He decided that this woman was now his main mistress. He bobbed his thin tail happily, not expecting anything bad to happen. Kelly did not stop, as if she wanted to unleash on the unconditional creature all the emotions that she could not express before Anthony. You shit all over my house. She was cursing at the poor dog. You nasty, stinking dog. I'm not going to let you ruin my happy new life. With those words, she leisurely got out of the car, opened the back door, and held out the puppy's long, cold, manicured hand. Baby Rio, with no backward thought, smiled at his mistress. He was excited, figuring they would go for a walk now. They had been on car rides like this before with the old master. True, he spoke better, calm and affectionate, but he too would put him in the back and open the door to let him out into the woods. Oh, if this little guy only knew what was waiting for him now. Cruel Kelly, without a drop of regret, grabbed the puppy by the scruff of the neck and threw it with a swing into the grass near the secondary road. Then, shaking her hands squeamishly, she sat back in the car, and before the doggie could realize anything, she stung the gas pedal with all her might. The 2-month-old puppy was left all alone. At first, he thought it was such a fun game and quickly, and Fuck rushed after the departing cars. But it was all for nothing. He was exhausted and yapping pitifully. He wandered quietly along the highway, abandoned and unwanted. Kelly at the same time turned on the loud music in the cabin and cheered. At last, she had managed to get rid of all those who were in her way so much. Oh, what happiness! She was already approaching her destination, not yet knowing that her grand plan was unlikely to come true. Many things. A lot of things didn't come out as easily as they seemed at first glance. But the boy raised his blonde eyebrows in surprise. "Mom, look what's so cute," asked the boy's mom, without taking her eyes off the road. "You know, you can meet deer here. The forest is just around the corner. Look carefully, Thomas." "No, look, I think there's a dog." The boy kept pointing out the window. "Mom, he's all alone." "Why is that?" "Let's stop." The woman behind the wheel slowed down, pulling over to the side of the road. Squinted. She followed her son's directions with her gaze. "Wow, how small," she said with surprise. "Is he lost?" The boy asked in surprise. "We have to help him." "I don't know," replied the boy's mother. "I guess he really is lost." She pulled away from the curb and cautiously drove closer to where the trembling red puppy was sitting. God, he was so tiny and so cute. He must have a collar. With those words, the woman got out of the car. Her son Thomas, 10, jumped out after his mother. He skipped briskly toward the puppy, but when he saw that the little one was frightened and brought to the ground, he stopped. "He's scared," whispered the boy. "Of course he's scared. Don't scare the little one." The young mother began to walk slowly toward the puppy, holding out her hand to him. "Don't be afraid, little one. We want to help you," she said affectionately. Little Rio looked puzzled and incredulous at these strangers. At first, he wanted to run away, but then, realizing something for himself, he made a careful and slow step towards these unknown people. A thin tail, clamped between his trembling hind legs, stuck out and weakly returned. On this very roadside, the little fellow had already spent several hours. For the first time, he didn't understand at all what was going on. He tried to catch up with every passing car, to see if his mistress had returned, but it was all in vain. He seemed to be all alone in the world, abandoned first by his master and then by his mistress. Frozen and hungry, he was too young to take care of himself. He took another step. He was not to be abused, then another and another. And now he was already cautiously securing the hand that was held out to him. It smelled very nice, much better than the old mistress's, or even smelled like a horrible, strong, synthetic scent. This soft hand smelled like something herbal and still tasty. "I guess she's not his enemy." "Well done." The woman praised the dog, smiling. "Now let me see your collar." She gently took the baby under her breast, lifting him into her arms. He cried out softly, but when he realized he was in no danger, he accepted the fact that he was being probed. The young woman twirled the collar in her hands. Nothing, just a regular collar, but a rather expensive leather one. There was a little hard capsule in the middle with all the phone numbers. No address to take the puppy to. She carefully removed the collar, in case there was some information on the other side. But alas, it was still the same, nothing but a small engraving. The woman raised her eyebrows. "Rio de Janeiro," she read, the only thing written on the collar. "What does that mean?" she asked her son. "Is he a Brazilian?" The boy couldn't stand by any longer, took a wide step towards the child. He slowly held out his hand to the baby for a sniff, as Rio acknowledged the stranger and realized that this one was no threat to him either. And what's more, that he was a human puppy too, cheerfully assured with his tail. Little Thomas was absolutely thrilled. He began, 3-5 fluffy behind his long ears, gently stroking his smooth head. "Ain't mama, what Brazilian? That's his name. Rio de Janeiro. Rio, And Rio's short for Rio, he's definitely called Rio. Look, he's responding. You're probably right, Thomas's mom said thoughtfully. But what are we going to do? He's freezing. His owners are probably already looking for him. With longing in his voice, said the boy. How did he get so lost? The woman raised her head, and she was silent for a few seconds, and then answered her son Thomas, I think he is not lost. What then? Asked Thomas, continuing to stroke the dog, who was already cozy in the arms of the woman. How did he end up here? I think he was abandoned. With bitterness in her voice, she replied. Abandoned. The boy asked indignantly, how could that be? Who could do such a thing? He's just a little boy, such a beautiful red-haired mommy. We'll take him for ourselves. For ourselves. Surprised asked the woman Honey, but we have no room for a dog. Besides, I don't know what breed it is. Suddenly he's washing into a huge dog, and we don't have much money. The boy tilted his head dreamily to the side. Yes, he stretched out as if not hearing his mother's arguments. He will definitely grow up and be big, big will protect us. Mommy, but we can't leave him here. He's gonna be alone. Oh, you're right, honey, the woman replied quietly. Of course we'll take him with us. Doria was a young single mother. She had separated from her father Thomas before she could even marry him. He left her when she was 7 months pregnant. Doria was a very kind woman, intelligent, beautiful, and incredibly capable. After graduating from school with a gold medal, becoming a real pride of her family, she entered one of the best universities in the country, dreaming of becoming a veterinarian. Her parents were proud of her. School teachers prophesied a bright future, and even friends marveled at how one person could combine both beauty and an incredible sharp mind. All in all, Doria grew up first as a wonderful child, and then as a hopeful teenager. And finally, she grew up. A beautiful and intelligent woman. Many around her were convinced that this person was capable of much. The first year at the institute went smoothly. Doria found it easy to study. Relations with classmates were just great, and she even had time for fun. So inherent in youth and personal life, this very life was beating key. One day, he appeared in her life. This was the name of the man who spoiled the whole life of a young, excellent, and beautiful girl. The guys met in the hall of the university, where the young man came to pick up his documents after expulsion. Word for word, smiles, light flirtation. And now Doria is already curling her long, light blonde hair. Preparing for the next assignment, her friends, having found out with whom she was going to meet, twisted their fingers at her temples. He's a jerk, the students lamented. You'll never work out. He's not right for you. They discouraged her, but Doria didn't care about public opinion. Something about David. There was something in him that Doria herself lacked. Freedom from conventional frameworks, boldness, and absolute rejection of the structure of the world. That's what attracted her. Good girls, unfortunately, are always drawn to the bad guys. David was expelled from the second year of study for failure, but he didn't seem to care at all. High school doesn't mean anything, he assured his new girlfriend on their first date. I and without education much to achieve, he said. The young people started dating. Their relationship developed rapidly, and here on New Year's vacation, Doria was on her way with her beloved to her hometown to introduce him to her family. The parents of the girl were in complete shock. Mitri turned out not at all who they would like to see next to their daughter. His long hair was gathered in a neat bundle, all his hands in strange tattoos, and between the eyebrows there was a piercing. David's mom, when she saw her daughter's boyfriend, grabbed her heart. Her father didn't bother and just threw them out after he made some unpleasant remarks about their modest home environment. Doria sobbed, unable to remember herself from grief. For what? What had he done to you? Angrily, she asked her parents. He's not at all what he seems at first sight. But her mother and father held their position, strictly forbade her to meet this young man, which awakened in Doria a real rebellion. If you do not accept my David, then you are no longer my parents. She shouted in her heart the girl's father, having decided that soon she would realize who she had messed with. Glumly replied, well, that means that you are no longer our daughter. Doria lost her parents overnight. She cut off all contact with them, preferring her lover to her family. The girl returned to the hostel with mixed feelings. Resentment choked her, but it was too late to retreat. She stopped communicating with those friends who were against her David. David himself forbade her to communicate with some of them, and many of them cut off all contact with Daria. When Daria found out who she was dating, sometimes it seemed to Daria that the whole world was against them. Against her, against David, against their relationship. She didn't know how to go on, but she knew one thing for sure: no one could ever separate them. Another 6 months went by like that. And here Daria, having quarreled with absolutely everyone, decided to move out of the dormitory and start a life together with David. The student moved to live in the apartment of her beloved A. He lived quite differently than he had described to her earlier spacious apartment of his own. In the center of the city turned out to be a modest one-room on the outskirts, and instead of the promised housekeeper together, with David lived his grandmother, an old woman, about 90 years old. Daria, suffering from dementia, was in complete shock when she saw the conditions that life had prepared for her. Wouldn't the hostel be better? She asked herself, but it was too late to back out. It was not for nothing that she had completely abandoned her surroundings for David. Dina moved to her beloved, hoping for the best. After all, he promised to achieve incredible success. We'll get through this, she thought, but we're together. And let the whole world see what our love can do. After moving into her boyfriend's apartment, the student began to clean it up. She removed dusty 100-year-old wall carpets, washed the curtains, threw out all the junk that Wendy had collected over the years. Grandmother David increasingly Daria skipped classes more and more. Often Daria preferred domestic chores to studying. Daria got so into the role of a housewife that she even got used to the fact that Wendy's grandmother lived with them. She was quite a sweet old lady, at least as long as she didn't scare with her sleepwalking at night and strange behaviors. She'd leave the gas on, open the window wide open in the cold. The life of a young, promising girl slowly began to fade. She had already completely abandoned her studies. Her mood was more and more often floating at zero. She seemed bored with everything. David didn't seem so rebellious and rather an infantile singer. And even Wendy turned out to be an unusual grandmother, but a crazy old woman. Everything that Daria had fantasized about David turned out to be false. It turned out that he was expelled from the institute, not because he was carried away by a promising job on the side, but because he was simply lazy. And even the money on which the guy took his beloved to cafes and movies was not his income. It was his grandmother's pension. More and more often David did not appear at home. More and more often young Daria spent her evenings in the company of Wendy, cleaning up the mess the mad woman was making. Of course, kind Daria did the best she could and felt sorry for Wendy and tried to make her well. Inviting doctors home, and even washing the old lady in the bathtub and brushing her tangled hair. That day, when Daria, who had already lost patience and was tired of this life, was about to leave, a photograph caught her eye. It was a very old photograph. It had fallen out of the closet when Daria was packing her things. Daria looked at the photo and marveled. There was a picture of herself in the photograph. Yes, that's right. Wendy, only a very young, beautiful, laughing woman. She was holding some kind of miraculous apparatus and was wearing a white robe, and from the inscription on the back of the photo, Daria was surprised to realize that the old woman, suffering from dementia atheism, had once been a leading researcher with a PhD. Digging through the box from which the picture had fallen out, Daria learned a lot about Grandma Wendy's past. She had once been a prominent member of society, beautiful, intelligent, and self-reliant. The girl's heart clenched with pain and resentment for the old lady. Did she deserve such a life? That day, Daria never made up her mind to move out from David. She waited for the young man and had a serious conversation with him. Daria insisted on treating Wendy's grandmother. After all, she'd once been a well-respected woman. Did she deserve to have her own grandson take her pension? She deserved all of this. Why was the only person who had anything to do with her now was a girl who was a stranger to her? A girl whose name she couldn't remember and whom Wendy used to scare. Every time she went into the kitchen and thought she was a thief, Daria insisted that David should go to work, and on Wendy's good pension to look for a boarding house worthy of her, where the elderly are kept in cleanliness and comfort. But the indifferent David only lazily waved it away. Daria insisted, and then he got really angry. "Aha, you're so clever," he shouted angrily. "For her looks. How am I supposed to live then? Her doctor's pension is my main income. Do you know how she behaved when I was a kid? No, then mind your own business. She ain't going to no goddamn boarding school. Let her stay at home, she ain't got much time left anyway." To smoke the sky. Daria was in complete shock at what she had heard, because David's parents had died when he was a teenager. Wendy had no other relatives. Daria had grudgingly stayed in the apartment for the sake of Wendy's grandmother. Now she has completely abandoned her studies. She takes care of the infirm old woman. And after another 6 months, Daria unplanned got pregnant. Seeing 2 stripes on the test, she froze in place and did not feel anything at all. On the one hand, she had always thought that children were happiness. On the other hand, Daria wasn't at all sure what David would make of her. A good father. The unfortunate woman was floundering, not knowing where to put herself. Defense, of course, was out of the question. But what should she do? The confused student decided to call her parents first. The girl's father, having learned that his daughter is expecting a child. From this, David came to full fury. "Don't you dare have a baby with that asshole," he yelled into the phone. "You'll give birth to an imbecile like him. And then you'll forget about us forever." That day, Daria realized that there was nowhere to wait for help. She waited for David and told him the latest news. But he only lazily waved away his chosen one, and then ate the dinner she had prepared. He smirked cool on an exhalation, he reported. "What does that mean? Are you entitled to any benefits now?" "Yes." With her head, the girl realized that there was no hope for change in her young man at all. The young heart continued to believe it. Will he change when the baby is born? With a huff, she thought, a baby will make him a better man. Meanwhile, David found out that a single mother's allowance would be more than a married mother's, and plans for a wedding had to be canceled. Under the judgmental and curious stares of former fellow students, Daria hurried to the dean's office. She had come to do something that no one expected her to do: to take her documents from the university without graduating. Growing up, sticking her neck out, she came to dispel the myth that good girls never get into trouble. Former classmates at first did not even recognize in the stranger her Daria, taking her for someone's mother the surrounding murmurs. The most insolent ones were laughing and pointing their fingers, and David's name was repeatedly heard. She ignored the gossip. With a proud head, she took her documents and left the institute for good. Now a new life awaited her, an adult, family life. But since there was very little money in the newfound family, yesterday's students had to go out to work. Unfinished higher education did not give any advantages, and without experience they didn't take them anywhere. So poor Daria had to go wherever there was any money to be made. A dishwasher in a cafe. She invested the money she earned in the needs of her future child, buying all the things necessary for him, and saved the rest for a decent old age for Wendy. David, for his part, was not investing in any way. He almost stopped showing up at home. And at some point, Daria was horrified to discover that the money she had set aside had begun to disappear. When she called her future spouse for a serious talk, she learned a terrible thing. David suffered from mania, and almost all of Daria's earnings went to gambling. The heart of the future mother was shattered. She didn't know how to go on living. Her parents abandoned her. She had no friends left, and the man for whom the promising student gave up her future betrayed her. Or rather, not even so simply turned out to be completely different from the one whose image she drew in her amorous imagination. That's all, banal and bitter. Daria would like to leave him now, but her caring heart clenched with pain for Wendy. How could she be without her, 7 months pregnant? It was all decided by chance. One winter's evening, David didn't come home alone. Next to him was a young and pretty girl who embarrassingly hid her eyes. David proudly announced that he was in love, and in a rude way, asked Daria to move out the same day, so Daria had to leave the place she used to consider her home. Abandoned by everyone, a lonely loner. She just didn't know where to go if it wasn't for the baby. What was the young mother carrying under her heart? Daria would probably have given up, but for the sake of her baby, she gritted her teeth and fought on. A couple weeks later, dude, at the not-so-educated ex-girlfriend's house. Luck smiled on her, and Daria met a married couple who were on the lookout for a live-in housekeeper. She had found them through the classified ads. These kind people took the pregnant girl in, giving her a job and shelter. Daria worked in the sweat of her brow, with no memory of rest. The life she created for herself now, after 10 years of almost continuous labor, was achieved through pain and tears. And then she gave birth to a healthy baby boy and named him Thomas. And all these years she raised and educated him alone. She managed to get out of the hole into which the once young, desperately in love student had fallen. Of course, David's situation is not brilliant now, but she can still afford to rent a decent apartment and have a car to support herself and Thomas. What's life like? Far from ideal, of course. But Daria is happy to have what she has. She never made peace with her parents. The resentment against them was too strong. And what was expected? Some nothing is unknown. He didn't even answer the incoming call when the young mother called him from the maternity hospital. Daria was deprived of the future that everyone around her had so long and persistently prophesied to her. She had chosen her child over her own blood. Maybe someone will find her actions silly, or maybe someone will recognize in them themselves or their loved ones, and at least mentally support this young, selfless mother. In any case, David's life was the result of her actions. She never got a higher education and a prestigious job, but now she had more than money. David had a healthy and well-behaved son. She worked in a veterinary clinic, just as she had once dreamed. Of course, she didn't manage to become a doctor, but the vacancy of an administrator was quite accessible to her. And now in their lives there was a puppy, a small, and without a nice creature, which also needs support and protection. Maybe Daria will still find her happiness. Anything can happen. Who knows? The door to the apartment swung open and a happy Thomas ran inside, waving his arms happily. "We have a dog." "Yay, dog," he shouted with joy. "Mom, where is he gonna sleep? Can he sleep with me?" "Oh, please," the boy made a funny grimace. "Oh, Thomas, but don't get ahead of yourself." Stopped the uncontrollable joy of the child's mother. "He still needs to get used to us, We'll find a corner for him now." With these words, Daria slowly lowered the puppy she had been holding in her arms to the floor. Little Rio froze fearfully in place in front of him. He looked around uncertainly and trotted forward by his tail. "Oh, he's so fast," Thomas said excitedly. "Mom, how old do you think he is?" Daria frowned. "Oh, I don't know. Honey, this is the first time I've seen this breed of dog. I think he's still very young. No more than 2 months, 2.5. How much work do we have to do with him?" That's how little Rio settled in with David and Thomas and became a full member of the family. He seemed to grow by leaps and bounds. Growing bigger and smarter every day, Daria was not wrong in saying that the family still had a lot to look forward to. Rio turned out to be a real tomboy. He ran around the apartment like a bullet, demolishing everything in his path. Outside on a walk, Rio kept all the pigeons in the neighborhood busy when he saw birds. His funny face changed immediately, becoming more serious and attentive. In addition, Daria learned to toilet train the baby. In general, the family's life became much more complicated, but much brighter and fuller. One day, Daria found out that the collar they found Rio with was too small for him. She started looking for a new accessory on the internet, all the while mindlessly twirling the small collar in her hands. Maybe she should give it to someone. Daria was about to place an order from the store for another road behavior, a bag of food. I couldn't resist adding a toy for Rio. Suddenly something caught her eye. That capsule she'd noticed the first time she'd met Rio. It seemed she wasn't so simple. Daria spun it around in her hands, frowning slightly. "Thomas," she called to her son from the other room. "Thomas, come here." The boy was immediately at his mother's side. In his hands dangled a puppy, obviously quite tall. After their recent walk together, his eyes were closing and his paws hung limply, letting the world know how tired he was. Thomas held the baby carefully with both hands and glanced unhappily at his mother. "What's the matter? Can't you see I'm busy?" Daria laughed warmly. "That's interesting," she clarified. "How what?" the boy asked indignantly. "I was putting Rio to bed." "Honey, he's not a baby." Laughing, she replied. "He doesn't need to be put to bed. He's doing just fine on his own." "He should be," Thomas said resentfully. "Why did you call me?" "Right." Daria took the capsule off the collar and slipped it into her son's hands. "Look at this thing," she said thoughtfully. "Don't you think it's strange?" Thomas laid the puppy down on a nearby couch and took the capsule in his hand with a smart look. He twirled it around for a long time until there was a strange sound, and the capsule opened in two. The boy looked fearfully at his mother, and I didn't want to break it. "It's okay, honey," the mother smiled. She bent down to put the capsule back together as she suddenly noticed a small rolled-up piece of paper on the floor. That's what she held out. "What's that?" "What? What is it?" asked Thomas. "Mom." He suddenly grabbed his mother's hand before she could open the paper. "Mom, wait. What is it?" Daria asked. The boy looked longingly at his mom. In a quiet voice, he began. "What if this piece of paper has an address to the address of Rio's former owners? It's not like we're going to get it back. They do now." Daria hesitated for a moment. In fact, she hadn't even had time to think about what could be stored in this capsule. What if the address of the former owners had indeed been found? Goosebumps ran down her spine. It turns out it should have been returned to its owners long ago. But Thomas, the boy, is so attached to the baby, and in general. What kind of owners would leave a puppy by the highway? Daria shook her head decisively. "No, Thomas, that dog is ours now and no one else's." She replied confidently. If the former owners cared about the puppy, they wouldn't have left him out on the street to freeze. "Yes," Thomas answered cheerfully. "You're right, Mommy." "What's the matter with that piece of paper?" he asked impatiently. Daria finally unfolded the paper too. She was ready for different options. But what she saw inside only added more questions. 591490. She read the note. "And that's it?" she asked upwards and shrugged, perplexed. "What kind of a set of numbers is that? It doesn't look like a phone number." "Thomas, what do you think?" The boy rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Maybe it's his personal number or something." "What do you mean?" she asked. "What other number?" "I don't know what number. Just a number that's his personal number. Like that branding he has on his tummy." "You think so?" Daria said thoughtfully. "I guess you're right." "I'm sure," the boy answered proudly. There came a savory sneer from him with a downpour. Thomas and his mom instantly turned around to the source of the sound and found an already awake Rio. Happy, joyous, but still sweetly howling. Oh man, Thomas was indignant. "We woke him up and now we have to put him back to sleep." He took a couple of steps toward the puppy, but the little one jumped up playfully, falling onto his front legs and leaping off the couch, barking cheerfully. A few seconds later, the two fun-loving boys and the puppy were already rattling the apartment, chasing each other and knocking over everything in their path. Rio was running around the apartment like he didn't know what was wrong at all. It's fatigue. He swung himself up under the couch, jumped inside a basket of dirty laundry, pissed off, pretending to growl at Thomas and clinging with his sharp lips to his clothes. All in all, the couple was having as much fun as they could. Daria laughed merrily, looking at them, and was unable to even pretend to swear. Finally, she placed the order from the store, stood up from her computer desk, and stretched. To hell with that number, she thought to herself, but for some reason she didn't decide to throw away the hidden capsule, along with that strange piece of paper. Instead, Daria put the capsule back together, putting the number inside, and headed for the large closet to put the find away. Daria searched with her eyes for a long time for a place to hide the strange item. She once again had time to think, why not just throw it away? But some unknown force stopped her again. Daria reached for the top shelf of the closet with her hand, found the box where her jewelry was kept, put the capsule and the note inside, and put the box back upstairs. After a couple of minutes, she forgot about the strange find. At the same time, on the other side of the city in the notary's office, there was an unusual, and even a little frightening dialogue. "What the fuck is the number?" shouted the spittle-spattered Kelly. "Can you explain what it is?" "Kelly? I don't know myself." Calm, placating. The tone was answered by a personable young fellow, an assistant notary. "I'm just telling you what the document says." The angry lady, irritated and tiredly, ran her palm across her face. "I need more information." Through gritted teeth, she sneered. "I'm explaining to you. I don't have that information." Slowly boiling over, replied the employee. "Just accept the fact that based on the last will of the deceased, inheritance was not intended for you." Kelly's face turned purple, her hands shook, her eyebrows drew together over the transfer and day. "How dare you?" she began in a quiet tone. "Who are you, anyway, to talk about my deceased husband?" "Actually, I am his lawful wife." "Respect it." The guy sighed patiently and, improving the moment while she wasn't looking at him, rolled his eyes. To receive the inheritance of Citizen Volushin, or rather the overwhelming part of the inheritance mass, namely money, the heir must provide a certain numerical code number. If you want, either remember this number or look for it somehow in the things of her husband, or either that the widow angrily splashed her hands and kicked me out of here, you have no right. Kelly was silent for a moment, and then there was a noticeable change in her face and lips. She smiled benevolently, which seemed especially creepy in contrast to her previous mood. Did her eyes sparkle with a greedy gleam? She changed her face instantly. Anger was replaced by coquetry. Even the widow's voice changed when she asked, "So you know the number?" "What?" The employee was outraged, involuntarily making a repulsive gesture. No, of course not. He wanted to leave the meeting room where he was having the conversation. With this tired of left customers, but stopped to say yes, even if I knew, I would not tell you at least, because I have no right to do so. And at most, because what rights are you talking about? Suddenly, his assistant was interrupted by his voice. A mediocre boss. In the spacious office appeared the one with whom Kelly had spent the most time in recent months. The notary himself, the notary to whom the late Anthony always referred, a solid man, smiled broadly at his client and looked at his assistant with disapproval. "What are those tones?" "Benjamin," gently but menacingly he asked, "you can't talk to a lady like that." "Yes, of course," the boy sneered and did not continue the dialogue. Under the stern gaze of his boss, he left the meeting room embarrassed, throwing one last disgruntled look at the nasty client. The notary guiltily smiled. "Forgive my assistant. He is still too young. Let's please go to my office." Kelly is getting annoyed. Fidgeting harder and harder, she nodded her shoulder. "We come on," she replied confidently and walked forward. When the office door closed, she, deciding not to be ceremonious, got straight to the point. "What is this number?" she asked angrily. "Can anyone explain it to me clearly? I can't get my inheritance for a month. I'm going to sue your office. Mark my words." The lawyer smiled broadly, holding back a laugh. "Go ahead, Kelly. Don't be shy. But on what grounds are you going to sue us?" "Tell me, please, on what basis?" she asked irritably. "On the grounds that you're withholding my inheritance? That's a crime. Everyone knows that my husband was a rich man. You think I don't know how much money we're talking about? Of course, you decided to keep my inheritance for yourself. Cheaters." The notary shook his head. "I knew your husband well. He was not only rich, but also incredibly honorable. That's one thing. Secondly, the certificate of inheritance is issued after 6 months from the date of death. As much as I'd like to, I can't give you access to the inheritance, as you put it, until that time has passed. You've applied for an inheritance. Now, by law, we must wait for all other interested parties, if any, to do the same. And finally, who gave you reason to believe that your late husband's estate should go to you?" In a split second, the restless woman was next to the notary's desk and cracked her fist on it with a rumble. "And who the hell do you all think you are?" she shouted. "What the hell, and to whom? If not me, I'm his lawfully wedded wife. To whoever gives you the secret number as stated in Anthony's will." The notary answered calmly, "I've told you so many times. Don't you remember? You, of course, are also due a marital share of the property acquired during the marriage and available at the time of the death of the testator. Once the statutory period passes, then we'll see what and how to distribute." Kelly seemed to almost explode, literally. "What kind of nonsense is this?" she asked, looking up, wondering when he'd even gotten around to making that weird will. He had a heart attack. Suddenly he couldn't know he was going to die. How is that possible? Everything is possible, the notary answered firmly. In general, wills and make mostly in advance, prudent. And people, of course. And your husband, undoubtedly, was such. But let's return to the subject of our little discussion. You found out the number. Did Kelly throw up her hands? No, I did not. But you said there was something else. Wasn't there? In addition to the number, you have to provide some proof. What kind of proof? Oh my God, she rolled her eyes. Remind me, please. You must prove that you took care of the Brazilian. The notary smiled slyly. That's all I have to say to a person claiming an inheritance. You must give the right number and provide the very same Brazilian, whoever he is and whatever that means. Only then will you have access to the safety deposit box that holds the bulk of the deceased's estate. Until then, you are quite welcome to use what your late husband left to you personally, namely the apartment he left to you, and the house in the Star. Kelly. In fact, the house does not belong to you now either, the notary replied. But as long as the other heirs have not claimed it, you can stay in it for a while. The woman laughed nervously. Look, was he even in his right mind? When he made that damn will, I think he was out of his mind then. Putting his dogs to bed with him, giving them funerals. That's what he did for the last few years of his life. She glared and turned around with angry eyes to leave. Have a nice stay. The lawyer, after waiting until the lady was in the doorway, said quietly to himself under his breath, You know, Kelly, I have a feeling that Anthony's death has something to do with you. I don't know how, but I'll try to find out. From that day on, the notary and part-time good friend of the deceased Anthony began his investigation. Who knows where it will lead him? The angry widow was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. So many years and all for nothing. Desperate, she thought. It turned out that Anthony did suspect something. He'd written such a convoluted will. Her emotions were running high. Her heart was racing. I wanted to go out and strangle someone with my own hands. Preferably that nasty red dog she'd unfortunately dumped by the roadside. Who knew it could come in handy? Rio? No, Rio. Gasping, Daria shouted, coming down in pursuit of her four-legged friend Rio. Stock girlfriend and the young handsome dog only turned around at the call of his mistress. But nature's call was many times stronger. Standing still. For a few seconds, Rio decided that a passing bird is more important than David's call, and throwing a guilty look at his mistress started running. Stop, stop. The young mother was already visibly tired and unable to run anymore. She stopped on the spot, resting her palms on her knees to catch her breath. What kind of dog are you so annoyed with? She exhaled. The older Rio got, the harder he became to handle. At home, the dog behaved much more calmly than he had as a puppy. But outdoors, every time he saw a big bird, he was out of control. Otherwise, everything was fine. Little Rio grew into an adult, very handsome and intelligent dog. Perhaps the problem was his special intelligence. He understood too well everything that was going on around him. That's why he sometimes allowed himself such pranks, like today. Having analyzed the situation, he decided that catching up with the bird was more important than obeying his mistress. This peculiarity of the dog added a lot of problems to Daria. Rio was so fast that it was impossible to catch up with him. But now Daria knew that this behavior was just a peculiarity of her dog's breed. She found out at the clinic where she worked. They were talking about the employees' pets, and Daria decided to check with the doctor about something concerning Rio. Martin, I was wondering. You see, Thomas and I just recently got a dog, but something just struck me as odd. I thought maybe you might know something about it. I'm listening interested, the doctor replied, and stepped forward onto the counter. Congratulations, by the way, a new member of the family. That's great. What breed is it? May I ask? If I knew, I would love to tell you, she guiltily smiled. We found him on the road. Can you believe someone left a baby all alone on the highway? He was so small. He didn't look more than a month old. I don't know what kind of breed he was. But from a baby, our Rio was already a big dog. She proudly squared her shoulders. Yes, it is an interesting dog, though not obedient Rio. The man laughed good-naturedly. Interesting name. Did you come up with it for him? I don't know about that. We didn't come up with the name. The puppy had a collar with Rio de Janeiro engraved on the other side. We decided to call him Rio. And on that collar, there was some kind of capsule. I didn't pay much attention to it at first. I don't know what kind of gadgets they come up with. But when my son and I took a closer look at this capsule, we found a note inside it, and in the note some number. I don't know what to think. It seems nothing unusual, but I can't get these numbers out of my head. The doctor thought for a moment. He looked away. He nodded, nodding his fingers at Daria. I'm not likely to be of much use to you here, he answered honestly. Maybe the phone number of the owners? Oh no, it's definitely not a phone number. There are too few digits. Thomas suggested that perhaps it was his personal number, but an identifier, especially since he was branded on his stomach. Well, Valerie stretched out. I don't think so. To identify this or that animal, he is implanted with a chip. You know yourself. And the number on a piece of paper? Maybe someone is doing it, but in my practice, it has never happened. I see, answered Daria. It's a pity you don't know. I guess I've been giving these numbers so much importance for nothing. I suppose so. What's his branding? Daria shrugged her shoulders. Now she was stinging her hand along the inside of the counter, trying to find her smartphone. Yep, here it is now showing a picture of the branding. She rummaged through the pictures for a long time, trying to find a picture of the branding that flaunted on Rio's belly button. She was sure she'd taken a picture of it, but it seemed she'd been mistaken. Thomas Picks, Rio blurry pictures, meter readings, and there was still no branding. No sign of it. Daria shook her head. I can't find it. Just show me a picture of the dog. I'll tell you the breed. Right. Daria returned to her phone and proudly turned the screen to the doctor. Martin looked at the picture for a long time. He glanced uncertainly at Daria's receptionist. Are you sure this dog was abandoned? The woman smiled sadly. But of course, at least it looked that way. Why, it's an Irish setter. Raised his eyebrows, Doctor the hunting breed. If it has a pedigree, which it probably does, judging by the branding, it's a very expensive dog, dear. Anna frowned. But who would leave an expensive puppy on the highway? It would be better to sell it. And why did they buy it at all? It's ridiculous. She brushed it off, and I'll tell you who would. A doctor leaning on the counter. Someone with a lot of money. I don't know what kind of idiots they are. But apparently there are some Irish authors who are very intelligent and very active in nature. Such a breed should be practiced ideally. Go hunting. But you're hardly a hunter. Huntress. Right? Oh, what a hunt. Daria laughed. I don't know anything about it at all. She hesitated. Setter so no. I assumed he was a thoroughbred. But what's so expensive? What kind? The doctor nodded confidently. You know, what if you could show me the branding sometime? We could find the kennel, and then we could find the owners. Maybe he wasn't dumped at all. Maybe he was just lost. But no, the owner said firmly. I love our Rio, and my Thomas loves him to bits. Suppose we find the owners. And then what? I won't give him away. Do you know? Martin smiled. It's an interesting situation. Good afternoon. Sorry I'm late. A girl appeared in the doorway of the veterinary clinic. Guilty, looking at the doctor. In her hands was a small carryall, and sticking out of the small window was the face of a Yorkshire Terrier. Can you still see us? Sure. The vet nodded and gestured toward his office. Come with me, please. Daria smiled involuntarily at the sight of the doggie in her socks. She suddenly remembered that her son was waiting for her at home and very dirty. After a long walk the dog that Thomas would hardly be able to wash well by himself. Daria thought for a moment. As Valera said, did she ask herself or her sisters? Daria, the breed of dog. Her thoughts continued to revolve around the information she had just received. But really, what difference does it make how much a pet costs if it's part of your family? It could be an expensive and pedigreed dog or just a mongrel. Now Daria. It was even scary to imagine that she could give up their four-legged friend in favor of money. Daria called her son once more, asking how they were doing with the attempt, and looked at the calendar on the city streets. It was going to be a real spring. The snow was almost all melted. The air smelled of both earth and fragrance, and the awakening life-hunting dogs needed more movement. She thought and decided it was time to open the dacha season. David had no apartment of her own, but there was an old shabby house outside the city. She had bought it from a colleague, back when Thomas was a baby. The young mother decided that the child definitely needs fresh air, and she, in turn, her own real estate, taking a loan, which, by the way, she still has not fully paid off. She became a homeowner in the winter on this daughter was impossible to be on this house. No heating. But in the summer, it was so beautiful. And in the spring, of course, it was nice too. Having decided that it was high time to start going to the country house, Daria immediately informed Thomas about the upcoming trip, and with joy in her heart started to wait for the weekend. By Friday evening, the whole family, including the dog, arrived at the cottage. Daria got out of the car first to open the gate. Thomas, along with Rio, remained seated inside for the time being. The woman got out of the car, looking around. She took a deep breath of the fresh, already slightly warm in air. "It's beautiful," Daria said aloud. She opened the old gate to park the car inside the lot, got back behind the wheel. When the car pulled inside and the gate was closed again, the mother nodded her head to her son as a sign that they could get out of the car. "Just be careful with hers," she warned. "Yep," replied the boy and opened the door wide at the same second. As if at the speed of light, an excited dog jumped out of the car. For a couple of minutes, he secured the territory, and then, contrary to the expectations of his mistress, sagged, and Plasteski lightning fast passed and bent under the closed wickets. "Rio, stop." He ran after the dog, shouted the frustrated Daria, "Stop, to whom I say stop." But the infatuated dog did not even turn around at the call of his mistress. He with amazing grace maneuvered among the bare bushes and put piles of snow, deftly jumping over large puddles, tired from running. Daria stopped and looked angrily after Rio's pets, as if guided by an invisible thread, definitely running towards his goal. But Daria had no way of knowing what that goal was. She panted and chased after the tireless hunter again. After all, he had almost disappeared from her sight. Eventually, the restless Rio led her to a wide field. There he, in spite of the fact that almost up to his chest, fell into the snowdrifts. With incredible speed, he flew into the bushes and picked up a large flock of large birds unknown to Daria. The birds noisily beat their wings and flew into the air at once. Rio finally stopped, mesmerized, watching the game. Also watching the birds, mesmerized, was Daria herself, as beautifully as it came out of her mouth. She shifted her gaze to the psoriasis and "Get over here already." The dog looked at his mistress with an expectant gaze. He seemed to be waiting for something. He tilted his head to the side. There was disappointment in his gaze. It was as if he was telling her, "Well, what about you?" Daria took a step toward Rio's dog. "It's time to go home." The dog only barked unhappily in response. Daria, however, continued to slowly approach the dog to grab the prankster by the collar and lead him home. "Why are you so eager to catch those birds?" she asked him. "Of course he does." Suddenly, a rough male voice came from behind her. Daria flinched, turned around, and saw a tall, broad-shouldered man approaching her, a large gun dangling from his shoulder. He was wearing a camouflage suit and thigh-high boots. The stranger smiled broadly as he approached. "You don't have an ordinary dog, but a real hunter," he said. "You don't have to feed a dog like that. Just let him pick up the game. And from the looks of it, you have a fine specimen. I envy you," he said, coming almost right up to the woman. I know," she said, embarrassed. "But I'm not a hunter at all." She smiled guiltily. "So my friend will have to run home as soon as possible. I think it's getting dark." The man opened his eyes wide. "Really?" He stretched out in surprise. "Such a dog should definitely go hunting. I'm telling you this as a hunter with experience. And otherwise, why did you get this breed? Would you have gotten a Chihuahua? For example, sensing the irony, Daria rolled her eyes resentfully. I didn't get that particular breed on purpose. I didn't know when I found the baby that he was such a catch. She looked at Rio and stroked his head affectionately. At the same time, the dogs sniffed the clothes of the man who approached them. It turned out he was sniffing something very interesting to him. Did you find it surprising? Asked the man. How so? It's a red Irish setter. Such dogs are not on the road. They are not only expensive, but also rare. How come you didn't know? They are. Laughing, replied Daria. My son and I found it on the road. Somebody left a baby on the side of the road. Dumped a little puppy. It wasn't far from here, by the way. We were just on our way back from the cottage. That can't be. The man replied indignantly. What kind of owners are these? You know, I know the owner of the kennel that breeds these beauties. That man would never, ever sell his puppy to anyone he didn't know. He well selects new owners for his dogs, even conducts various checks and tests. And here it is. I'm totally shocked. He continued to be indignant. How is it? Daria replied in a quiet voice. I guess I'll go now, it's getting dark. Wait. The hunter wanted to take the girl's hand, but stopped, deciding that such a movement would be indecent. What is your name? Daria replied, smiling. Lovely name, answered the man, my favorite since Daria, the goddess of the hunt. She laughed warmly in response. What is your name? Daniel? You can just call me Dan. He smiled. You said you had a house here. Perhaps we could see each other again. I'd introduce you to the owner of the kennel I told you about. He would tell you a lot more about this breed than I think we could meet. Embarrassed, Daria replied. She raised her head and looked carefully into the hunter's eyes. The color of his eyes fascinated her. Blue, bright, like a clear spring sky. We live over there. She pointed with her hand in the direction of her dacha. The plots are numbered. Ours is the third. Come by tomorrow evening, for example. I've taken a few days off work, interviewed my son at school. We'll be here for at least a week. Daniel got a look. I can't tonight. The best time to hunt birds is right around sunrise or sunset. Like now, for example. He smiled broadly. By the way, I was just walking toward the pond. Take a good look. Maybe you could let your dog go for a good run with me, and then I'll bring him back to you. Daria thought about the duck. No, not at all. He put his hands up. You can't shoot ducks now, only Seleznev. He shifted his gaze to the dog that had not killed his leg so far. You know, I think your dog is all for it. He doesn't need to be trained. I've seen him pick up birds. I think he can do it. What do you think? The landlady, of course, was going to refuse such an offer. However, the man's beautiful eyes made it very difficult, this answer option. Of course, she didn't know at all. She didn't know who he was. Didn't know what to expect from him. What if he stole her? She scrutinized the man, then shifted her gaze to Rio. She thought about it. Sorry, but no, she still refused to Daria, and she wished she could say yes. She wanted her dog to do what he was supposed to do, but fear for her pet overpowered her. I don't know you at all. Fair enough. Daniel smiled broadly. In that case, you and I will have time to get to know each other. Daria started, and I hope she spent a few more long seconds, looking at the man with confusion. There was something about him that tugged at the delicate strings of her soul. There was in him a masculinity, a bravery of undeniable strength, and even nobility. Daria was too shy to ask her new acquaintance how old he was, but she guessed that he was older than her, but not by much. Daria had never really thought about hunting as a hobby. It was a hobby. It always seemed barbaric to her, not modern. It's one thing to buy meat to make dinner for your family, and quite another when it's just entertainment, killing for fun. It made her cringe. All in all, she didn't quite know how she should feel about such a sport. Nor had she known any hunters until now. But Daniel seemed a good-natured man, interesting and intelligent. Mommy screamed, Thomas, Mammy, where did you go? The boy ran out of the house when he saw his mother through the window. I thought something was wrong. Oh, Thomas, I'm sorry. Mom grabbed her head. I didn't realize you'd be so worried. And I didn't get a chance to come back earlier. Of course I will. What happened? Where did he run off to? The boy was right next to Rio. examining him from different angles. "Kid, are you okay?" he asked, putting the flask of his favorite dog with his head. "It's all right, all right. Don't worry," reassured the mother to her son. Walked up to Thomas and kissed him on the top of his head. Rio chased the birds as usual. Thomas laughed warmly. He must think he'll take off on his own one day. Where was he in the field? Do you remember when we used to walk there in the summer? And we met someone. Who? Thomas asked in surprise with one uncle. Telling about Dan, Dario was momentarily embarrassed he was a hunter. He said that our Rio is also a born hunter. That's why he chases pigeons in the park. Even offered to take our Rio hunting. But I refused. I don't know this man to hunt yet. The boy's eyes rounded with delight. Shit, Mom, why did you say no? Rio, alas, was a real tough dog and would have caught us a bear. Daria laughed, but not a bear, but a duck, maybe. I actually like duck. By the way, it's been a long time since you cooked Putin, and the legs. Thomas hugged the dog once more and then rose to his feet. He folded his arms across his chest with a smart look. Or maybe I want to go hunting too, he said suddenly. Asked this uncle. Maybe he'll take me too. Surprised, his mother splashed her hands. Honey, I told you, I don't know him at all. How can I give him Rio and trust you? Maybe, sure, but later. But Mom. The boy was indignant and, calling the dog with him, walked deep into the lot. A few hours after the unexpected encounter, Daria and her family were walking slowly along the plots, looking around carefully. During this time, she had already managed to sort out all the things they had brought with them to clean the house. After the long winter, when all the chores were done, the family went out for an evening walk with Rio. The dog made a careful detour all around. Every now and then, listening to something that apparently only he could hear every now, and then the dog would freeze in place on you in his dangling ears. And sometimes he would get into a stance as if preparing to jump, noticing something that Rio was ready to lunge at. Daria would stand too, spreading her legs wide so she wouldn't fall. When the dog had done all his business and Thomas and his mom were about to walk toward the house, an attentive Rio froze in place and then tore off with such force that Daria couldn't keep the leash in her hands. Rio, what on earth are you going to do, Rio? Shouted. She ran after the dog to her mom. Stop, suddenly Thomas shouted. I'll catch up with him myself. With these words, the boy ran forward. Daria stopped abruptly. How grown up is he? She thought, watching Thomas. So independent. Thinking so, she headed in the direction her son and the dog had run off in. After a few turns, Daria noticed an unusual sight. There in the distance stood her Thomas, actively gesticulating with his hands and telling something to an unfamiliar man. A mother's heart skipped a few beats. Who the hell is that? She managed to think. Concerned mommy quickened her step, trying to get to her desired destination as quickly as possible, coming closer. She exhaled with relief. Standing next to Thomas was Daniel. The sight she saw made her heart beat faster and her cheeks visibly redden. Her son looked at his companion with a look of delight. Her favorite dog was circling nearby. Now and then jumped on Dania and pawed his clothes with dirty paws. Suddenly a thought popped into David's head. She liked Daniel. He looked so harmonious, so attentive to little Thomas. He could probably replace a father to a child. And Thomas has never had a male role model. He has no one but me, she thought wistfully. Daria put on her most welcoming smile, fixed her hair, and moved forward. Daniel, nice to meet you, she said, stepping closer. Daria, good evening. The hunter smiled broadly. I don't mind using the first name. I've already met your son. Why didn't you tell me he wanted to go hunting? I'd love to take Thomas with me. Oh, but Daria's embarrassed. How did you know he was my son? How do you two look alike? The man looked from David to Thomas and back again. I recognized your dog right away. He patted her on the head. He's a real hunter. He smelled game right away. Daria, please let him go out in the field. And Thomas too. I could use some help, yes. Daria smiled faintly, lowered her gaze. Only now did she notice that a bag filled with game lay beside the man. It was immediately clear to her why Rio was so abashed at the new acquaintance. The expression on her face changed noticeably, which didn't go unnoticed by the tribute. "Dariet is all right," he asked. Then he followed the look. "Womano, I'm sorry. I didn't offer you a fresh bird, did I? I'm not offering you a fresh bird now, of course. I have to butcher it first, but I'll be sure to bring you a mont tomorrow." "Isn't it great?" asked the educated boy. "Just today, I asked my mom to cook a duck," he told Daniel. Dan smiled and winked at Daria. "By the way, how about this? I'll take Rio and Thomas hunting with me, and in return, I'll give you half of the spoils." Daria looked down at him and looked at him again. "I don't mind." Finally, she answered, "When will you go hunting next time?" "At dawn." He thought for a while. "I propose this option. Tomorrow morning, Thomas and I, and to hunt. And in the evening, I'll invite you to my place, cook what we catch, and you'll take your share, of course." I don't know if she's thinking about tomorrow so soon. "But Mom, please." Thomas stretched out pitifully. Dan supported him. "Please, please," he smiled. Rio sat down on the ground and touched his mistress' paws demandingly. "But okay," Daria laughed and waved her hand and agreed. The next morning, Dan, taking Thomas and Rio with him, went hunting. The boy was absolutely thrilled with this pastime. All the next day, he talked about the birds he had caught, about hunting in general, and about Daniel. In the evening, the family came to visit the hunter and tasted the taste of the lower heavens. This was how Daria and her new acquaintances came to an agreement. She would allow her son and Rio to go out into the field with the man. In return, he would treat them to fresh meat. Daria sometimes wondered if it was me who owed him. Thomas is so happy, busy doing what he loves, but she wouldn't admit it to a man. Still, she enjoyed spending time with the hunter. Of course, their communication was not limited to this arrangement. The young people often went for walks together. Thomas and Rio would run ahead, and they would follow. Talking about everything, Daria could not admit to herself that she liked this guy. Her previous relationships had left a deep scar in her soul, but it was hard to go against her own feelings. And it was obvious that Daniel Daria liked him too, or even more so. They could talk for hours. They could walk without getting tired. The girl often noticed how the young man looked at her, how he looked into her eyes. Such moments turned everything inside her upside down. She wanted to scream, "But kiss me at last," but she remained silent. Donnie, on the other hand, was very modest. Maybe he was afraid Daria wouldn't reciprocate. Or maybe he was afraid of ruining their relationship by being too hasty. In the end, each of them knew exactly what the other liked, but no one dared to take the next step. Toward the end of the week, as David and Thomas' unplanned vacation came to an end, they decided to stop by Dan's house to say goodbye. Upon learning that his new friends were leaving, Daniel was very upset, even though he had already planned to return to the city in the next few days. After some thought, he suggested that next weekend they go to a different place together. Fresh air, hunting, a small cabin in the middle of nowhere. As it turned out, he knew some good places he'd been renting for years. Daria was nervous, but agreed to stay with the man, to sleep in the same house. She both wanted what it could lead to and was afraid at the same time. At the same time, the following actions were taking place in a completely different place. The notary, who was also a close friend of the late Anthony. Frowning his eyebrows, gazing into the monitor, he ruffled his hair, stood up abruptly from his chair. Then, after thinking, sat back down. "So what's all the fidgeting about?" he asked. "How much longer do we have to wait for patience?" "Sebastian, now we will see everything," in a level tone replied the assistant. After the day Kelly had come to see him for the last time, Sebastian thought deeply. He couldn't figure out what had put the idea in his head. But it was clear to him as day that the lady was hiding something. He couldn't figure out what, and there was essentially no clue, unless you counted the very personality of this Kelly a nasty, vile, and obviously very evil woman. Sebastian was almost certain. She was definitely hiding something. It was time to think about it. The notary decided to question the deceased's entourage, not friends or relatives, but servants and subordinates. He asked very unusual and even strange questions without asking a word about Georgie, his death, or his inheritance. He asked each of them only one thing: who Kelly was, according to his interlocutor. What is she as a person? The servants spat when they heard that name. The subordinates hid their eyes in shame. One thing was clear: nobody liked the lady. Intuition did not fail here. Then Sebastian, thinking long and hard about further actions, went for a trick from the security guard who worked at his friend's house. He found out that there were surveillance cameras all around the perimeter of the property, as well as in the house itself. He found out that they had been installed over 12 years ago, just when Kelly had cheated on Anthony. Sebastian had also known about this fact for a long time from the cheating husband himself. As it turned out, the cameras were tiny, inconspicuous, and Kelly was unaware of them. The only thing left to do was to get the records from the date of Anthony's death and see if there was anything suspicious that day. For the past hour, Sebastian and his assistant Benjamin had been going through the camera footage. They scrutinized every corner of the large property, but nothing suspicious had happened. Then they started to look at the footage from the house, but there was nothing there either. When the lawyers had almost given up hope, thinking that they would never find anything, they noticed the strange behavior of the couple in the living room. The very moment when Anthony brought the dog into the house, when the couple began to quarrel. And now the woman ran off to her bedroom, and the worried husband followed her. There they are in the bedroom. There's the bastard, pretending to sob. And then, oh my God, look, shouted out the worried Ben. This is the moment of death. With a lump in his throat, he said. Yes, quietly whispered to Sebastian's assistant. What they saw shocked them. Sebastian was right. She was the one to blame for his friend's death. She was the one who hadn't called an ambulance for him in time. That was it. Kelly be damned. Sebastian rose sharply to his feet, but she would pay for this. He said harshly, "But Chief, who gets the inheritance then?" The aide asked gently. "I don't care who. The main thing is that I will do everything I can to make sure that this woman gets a fair punishment for the death of my friend." And Daria, Dan, Thomas, and Rio came to the country. Dan had rented a beautiful, spacious hunting lodge deep in a centuries-old forest. The young hunter had made sure everything went smoothly in advance. He chose a suitable house for rent, bought the necessary groceries, and didn't forget to bring some treats for Rio and extra gear for Thomas this weekend. Dan, though he tried not to show it, wasn't hoping for flying prey. He wanted Daria to be his true friend. Arriving at the appointed place, the woman began to carefully arrange her things. Dan, standing next to her, looked at her with loving eyes. "Maybe later," he asked, smiling. "Now let's go to the forest. And soon Thomas and I will go hunting." "Well, Oscar will wait, Daria asked, laughing. "What the hell is that?" "But things also, laughing," he replied. "Things can be sorted out later. I would help you with that. Right now we need to assess the terrain. Thomas, Rio, you to the window. Let's go, let's go." The baby and the dog jumped happily in place. The whole company left the house. They walked slowly, measuredly. Every now and then Danila stopped to look around, and Rio followed him, sniffing every bush carefully. "I would never have noticed," the girl said, pointing her head at another trail. "But you're so attentive, you see everything. By the way, whose trail is this? A boar?" answered Dan. And then he raised his eyebrows in surprise, because right behind him someone's voice synchronously answered David's question. A huge boar. The older man, unfamiliar to her, repeated cheerfully, "Daniel, nice to meet you." Also came Spring. Benjamin, the hunter, took a confident step towards him and shook the hand of the acquaintance firmly. That's what a professional means. No animal can hear you. You move so stealthily. Benjamin smiled. It's all experience. He shifted his gaze to Daria. "I'm so glad you'll come to your senses. How beautiful is your wife," he said. Daria blushed, and Daniel coughed embarrassedly. "It's not me. Why did he come to you?" His comrade interrupted him. "I don't remember you being here. I think that dog is mine. Where did you buy this handsome dog? Did you get it off the street? An owl? What kind? Oh, he's so handsome." He rubbed the backs of those who didn't resist at all. "Rio. Oh my. Is it a good thing we met you? I forgot I promised Daria. Dan looked at his companion. Meet Benjamin, owner of the best kennel of red Irish sweaters. Remember I told you about him? Eh? Hello, the beautiful girl smiled and extended her hand. I'm Daria, and this is my son Thomas. I didn't buy this dog, you know. I found him on the highway. Somebody threw him out when he was just a baby. That Benjamin seemed so lazy. What kind of nonsense is that? It can't be. Daria shrugged. Maybe you and I found our Rio on the way back from the cottage. Was it like that? Stop impolitely. Rio's kennel owner interrupted her. Is that really our Rio de Janeiro? He was bought from me by a good man, also a hunter. Unfortunately, he died. It can't be the same dog you have. He still has his owner. Benjamin unceremoniously approached the dog, ordered him to lie down. The man's stern and confident voice convinced the dog not to show off, but to obey the command. Probably it was the result of years of experience with dogs. Or maybe Rio realized something when the breeder scrutinized his belly. He almost jumped with surprise. This is indeed the branding of my kennel. Where did you say you found it? And Daria, together with Thomas, once again told the story of how they met Rio on the road. Benjamin's eyes grew sterner, his eyebrows furrowed sternly. After listening, he said menacingly, did Kelly get rid of the puppy after Anthony died? No, she'd always been a peculiar woman, of course, but not like that. His eyes went blank. His expression was one of utter disappointment. I've always been so careful about choosing owners. I wanted my dogs to live with decent people, and now this. We're decent people, too. Little Thomas interjected into the conversation. The older man smiled affectionately at him. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm glad Rio has found a new family. Of course, and I can see you're taking good care of him. But the way Kelly's been acting, I'm gonna go over there and find out. I'm sorry, folks. I gotta go. Dan, I'll call you back. With that, the kennel owner walked away with a quick stride. That's how it is, isn't it? He shuffled from foot to foot in embarrassment. Why is he going to see Laura? Asked Daria, starting to get visibly nervous. Why does he want our dog back? Not giving it back is our dog Daria. It's okay. The guy calmed her down. You don't have to worry so much. Yeah, Mom, don't worry. This guy seems cool. He won't do that. I hope not, the woman said quietly. It was night. The company had already returned from the hunt, having caught a lot of game. Thomas ate a hearty dinner and went to bed on the second floor, while Rio quietly suggested the spacious recliners in the corner. Daria sat in front of the fireplace, putting her hands to the fire, and the dialogue with Benjamin did not come out of her head. What will happen now? She wondered. What if this Kelly wanted Rio back? She was snapped out of her musings by a gentle touch on her shoulder and the low voice of a tribute. Are you worried about everything? Yes, I am, she confirmed, realizing that it was unlikely that a man like Benjamin would bring the dog back alive. But suddenly she looked up sharply and only now realized how close Dan was to her. Her head spun, her fingertips began to prick, and she wanted to pull away, shying away from the unnecessary closeness. But the beauty of Dan's eyes so mesmerized her that she was unable to move. The scent that emanated from the hunter's Jura beckoned piney, subtle notes. He literally smelled like a forest, a woody odor and the smell of gunpowder. She shifted her gaze from his eyes to his lips. It's like I can feel the change coming, she said in a whisper. So do I, Dan answered. And unable to hold back any longer, she pressed her lips to his. His kiss was so tender. He seemed to stop breathing, afraid of offending the girl of his dreams, when he gently pulled away. Daria, on the other hand, took the initiative. From that very night, the couple became one and never parted again. A few days later, the young people, overwhelmed with happiness, could not think of anything else. They could not get enough of each other's company. Every day the couple spent together, and the thought of parting for a moment drove them crazy. One similar morning, Daniel, who was self-employed and free from strict schedules, invited Daria to a cafe to have breakfast together. When the couples were already brought the menu and they started to choose their meals, Daniel's cell phone suddenly rang. Who is it? Daria asked carefully. Something important. It can't wait. Let's see. Daniel pulled his smartphone out of his pocket. Benjamin is calling. Suddenly the hunter said. If you want, I won't answer it. Benjamin is the owner of the kennel. She is interested. Pitched forward. Answer it quickly. Suddenly he's already gone to see the woman. Dan shrugged his shoulders and answered the phone. As the conversation progressed, the expression on his face changed. After many minutes, he finally hung up the phone and looked at his beloved seriously. So what's the impatience there? She asked. Speak rather differently. I will go crazy. No, Daria. No one is taking your dog, said Dan. It's Kelly. I think she's going to do time. What? Why? Daria immediately calmed down about Rio. So that's the profile of Rio's ex-mistress, huh? Yeah, a normal person would never do something like that. So what did she do? I think she killed her own husband. After saying those words, the man finally exhaled. And I knew him. Or rather, I'd crossed paths with him a couple times while hunting. This man, Anthony, knew my father well. When Benjamin told me that a good friend of his had died, I didn't realize it was about him. He was a good, soulful man. I'm so sorry. Daria took his hand, but how did she kill him? Technically, she didn't kill him. He had a heart attack, and she didn't call an ambulance. She stood by and watched him die, waiting until he was beyond saving. This was all recorded by hidden CCTV cameras. Shortly before he died, Anthony bought it from Benjamin. And a couple months before that, his faithful and old dog died. And he took it very hard. It was as if Anthony sensed something. By the same day, he picked up Rio. He went to a notary and made a will about his wife's failure to provide care. It was his notary who found out. They were friends. He sensed something too, and started digging up Kelly. Now she's in custody, and she's facing real time. How awful, Daria replied quietly. But how did Benjamin know all this from that notary? By the way, he said that we should visit his office. Daniel frowned, puzzled. I didn't understand why, though, did I? It's really strange. Daria confirmed his words. But since it's my day off today, maybe we could go right away. Do you know the address? I do. Let's go, Dan said. And with his hand, he invited the waiter to serve the bill. Half an hour later, they were at the right place. Getting out of the car, Daria looked around the neighborhood while they called someone, arranging to be admitted. A couple minutes later, an assistant notary appeared in the lobby of the office. A young guy named Benjamin. He smiled intriguingly when he saw the client and invited them in. On the threshold of his office, Sebastian was already waiting for them. Very satisfied and even happy. Good afternoon. He greeted them. I hope you had a good trip. How may I address you? Daria answered the visitors, embarrassed. And this is Daniel, my friend. Nice to meet you, Daria. He repeated the name slowly, as if tasting it. Daria is a beautiful name, the goddess of the hunt. You knew that, didn't you? My late client had a passion for hunting like nothing else in this world. Tell me, did you know the late Anthony? No, the woman answered. I did, but unfortunately not as well as I would have liked. My father knew him well, Daniel added. Great. Sebastian opened the door of his office wide, inviting the young men in. He pressed a small button on the landline phone and asked the receptionist to bring everyone coffee with lemon or milk. As if deliberately delaying the time, he asked, Sebastian, don't take this the wrong way, but why did you invite us? He asked Daniel straight in the forehead. The notary smiled enigmatically. Good question. Please sit down. The fact is that my late client and dear friend made a very unusual will, as he had no children or other relatives. He decided that when he died, his estate would go to someone who shared his life views and values. Of course, he was married, but you already know what his wife did. He cast a bitter glance around the audience and continued, seeing the sympathy on the faces of his interlocutors. Many people thought Anthony was strange and unloved. That was partly true, but he was a kind man, very intelligent, and thought that dogs were much better than people. You're probably wondering why he didn't leave a will for his wife, because he knew who she really was. Yeah, he didn't divorce her. He had a soft, heartfelt pity, but he always knew she was only in it for the money. So when he began to feel his days were coming to an end, he decided to leave this unusual will. Before his death, he had bought an expensive hunting dog, but since he assumed that he might soon give his soul to God, he decided to take care of his new friend and who would shelter him in case of his master's death. After all, as you've realized, he knew that his spouse would by no means deal with the puppy. Really, he had no idea how nasty she'd be, so concluded the notary. I am now going to read you his will. It sounds like this. He took out of the safe a document on colored watermarked letterhead and read aloud all my property, wherever it may be and in whatever form it may consist, which will belong to me at the time of my death, including my house, bank deposits, and the like, shall go to the person who provides proof that my Brazilian is in good standing. Also, that person must name the V6 and the code. That Sebastian looked carefully at his interlocutors. The number, if you wish, 6 digits. Do you think you know someone who could claim this inheritance? A Brazilian? Daria said the strange words quietly. That's our Rio, our dog, an Irish setter. Rio's full name is Rio de Janeiro. Yes, Sebastian smiled contentedly. That's right. We're talking about a red Irish setter dog. Really, we'll have to establish that the dog is exactly what we need. As you probably know, he must have a chip with a unique number. As for the numerical code, I think you should know that as well. And I think I do know, Daria said thoughtfully. She frowned a little, remembering the thing that had kept her busy for so long, exactly the number. I know that number. Joyfully, she replied. Literally the very next day, Daria and Rio were on their way to the examination to present the proof for the notary. A panel of reputable veterinarians, smiling, determined that this dog was indeed very well looked after. A little later, Daria, going through her jewelry box, found the right code. The same numerical code that she and Thomas had found in the capsule that hung on little Rio's collar. Thus, Daria received an incredible inheritance, a huge house, and a large sum of money. It's a small apartment Kelly's left behind. Unfortunately, or fortunately, she never needed it. She had already been using another service apartment for several weeks in one of the colonies of the Federal Penitentiary Service of the Federal Penitentiary Service. Daria and Daniel got married a few months later. At first, Dan did not want to move into Anthony's house. He was embarrassed that his bride had such a large dowry. But what won't you do for the one you love? Most of the money Daria had invested in the organization of shelters for homeless animals. After all, he was already earning well. And the rest she put aside for the education and future of her children. Why children? Because she already had a new little heart beating under her heart. Soon Thomas had a little sister, and then another. Rio wasn't without gifts either. One early fall morning, he was thrilled to find a little redhead in the yard. She was very shy and trembling, hiding her slender tail between her hind legs. But Rio's alert cavalier quickly explained to her that no one would ever hurt her here. Every hunting season since then, Daria, tangled in a warm plaid, usually stood on the veranda for a long time, holding a hot cup of steaming coffee, and looking after her most beloved and closest in this life, a tall, well-built, blue-eyed man to his young companion, a teenager, and 2 cheerful, gusty Irish senators, hot as fire and bright as the low sun rising on the forests.
Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Adriana sat at home waiting for her mother and father to come home from work. They worked at the poultry farm as laborers. Adriana had already heated her parents' dinner and looked out of her relative's window. Soon the 17-year-old girl saw her mother, followed by her father. Adriana smiled and ran to open the front door. As soon as her parents walked in, Adriana said she wanted to talk to them over dinner. The head of the family looked at her daughter with a stern look and asked, "I hope the conversation is not about your pregnancy." "Daddy, again you have failed to make a joke." A little irritated, said the daughter, who already knew her father's gaze and always distinguished when the gaze is angry. And when deliberately angry in such a situation, the man was not angry. The head of the family on the daughter's answer laughed and said, "You know me and my mother as peeled. Okay, let's set the table and talk over dinner. Soon the family was sitting in the kitchen and talking peacefully. When dinner was about to end, the girl's father asked his daughter what exactly she wanted to say. Adriana hesitated a bit and said that she had changed her mind about going to medical school and wanted to become an interior designer. When the father heard this, he was amazed because his daughter had been dreaming about medicine since she was 16 years old. And then, when it is already necessary to go to enroll, she changes her mind. And he asked why you choose this particular direction in our village in this specialty. You obviously do not get a job. I know that, but maybe I'll be lucky enough to make my personal life in the city. And to be honest, I don't really want to go back to the village where there's no future. You're the one who started dreaming about a prince on a white horse, but you are not yet 18 to think about it, said the girl's mother. Mom, Dad, but I'll be 18 on September 1st, and I'm not saying that I'm going to the city to arrange my personal life right now. Right now, I want to major in design. Parents. The girls looked at each other, and the head of the family did not object to his daughter's choice. He told his wife that Adriana has the right to decide what she wants to be in the future. Adriana's mother looked at her child, then hugged her and asked her to keep her head in the city. The girl gratefully hugged each parent in turn. Soon, Adriana left for the city where she enrolled in college to study design. The girl was given a dormitory as a non-resident. She immediately made friends with her roommate, and soon Adriana began her studies. In college, Adriana especially became friends with fellow student Betty, who lived in this city with her parents. Adriana liked this girl with her carefree character. Time moved imperceptibly, and now the winter vacation was approaching. A week before Adriana's departure to the village, Betty suggested to her to go and sit in a cafe. Adriana supported her friend's idea, as she didn't often visit such places due to lack of money. Her parents sent her some money, but they quickly ran out. Soon the students were sitting in a cafe and discussing how they would celebrate the new year. Betty said that she would go to a nightclub where she would have a good time. Adriana said sadly that she did not have such an opportunity because they had not yet built such entertainment places in the village. Betty looked at her in amazement and then asked, "How do you have fun there? Young people usually go to the club on weekends for discos." "Well, it sucks. I don't envy the villagers," Betty said with a laugh. The girls continued to talk to each other as two young men approached them and offered them company. Betty looked at the boys. Then she looked at Adriana as if to ask if she would be willing to be introduced. Adriana nodded and let her friend know she was okay with it. And in just a few minutes, the guys had already joined the girls. One of the young men was called Constantine, and the other Stephen. Adriana immediately took notice of Stephen, and the whole evening was sneaking glances at him. Adriana also noticed that her friend liked this guy. Some more time passed, and Adriana told the company that it was time for her to go to the dormitory. The young men sighed disappointedly, and Constantine said that he and his friend had hoped to go for a longer walk. Adriana responded by suggesting that they should meet tomorrow and just walk outside. Stephen, having heard the suggestion, took up the idea, and then he drove Adriana to the dormitory and then Betty home in his car. Adriana was already lying down to rest, thinking about her new acquaintance, when she received a call on her cell phone from a friend. Betty excitedly described how she had a long conversation with Stephen when saying goodbye. Adriana unknowingly felt jealous of the boyfriend, and suddenly she said, "Classmates, why are you telling me this now? I want to bring it to your attention that I like Stephen, and I saw you looking at him in the cafe. So I'm going to ask you to turn your attention to his friend. Don't tell me what to do. And you're right to point out that I was looking at him because I liked him too. Now I will bring it to your attention that Stephen is an adult, and it's up to him to decide who he wants to spend his time with," Adriana said sharply, and immediately disconnected the connection. The next day, the girls met at the college. They felt that a cat had run between them and did not communicate especially strongly. And in the evening of the same day, when the girls met with their boyfriends, the young men noticed that the girls tried not to communicate with each other. Stephen at first tried to defuse the situation and then asked what fly had bitten you both. Yesterday was so much fun, and today it's like a day of mourning. Why don't we break into pairs? I want to go out with Adriana. And after the last sentence, he turned to Adriana and asked, "Do you mind?" "Of course not." With a smile, the girl answered, and looked triumphantly at her friend, who smirked wryly and said quietly, "But it's on. Go for a walk." Adriana got into the car to Stephen, and they went for a drive around the evening city. In the car, the young man asked the girl to tell about herself. She complied with his request, and then the man asked what had happened between the girls. Adriana, "Shit," she said to herself as she did not know what to answer. In the meantime, Stephen looked questioningly at Daddy, said a little fight they had. "Asking what for? Since I won't tell you anyway." "Okay, I won't ask. And anyway, you found out all about me. Why I don't know your background yet." The young man laughed and said that he kept more about himself on purpose, so that there was a reason to meet again. The young woman liked his answer, but insisted that he tell her about himself. From the narrative, Stephen Adriana learned that he is 27 years old, works in a bank. He lives with his mother, but is going to buy a 2-room apartment within a month. About his father, the guy said that his father died last year, and also the young man said that he was married. The marriage lasted only a year. The girl, having heard that Stephen was divorced, asked why he separated from his wife. The interlocutor, after a little thought, replied, "There is a reason that is most often used by people who want to divorce. It is called so. They did not match their characters. I hope that your curiosity satisfied." After a while, the girl said she had to go to the hostel. The man drove Adriana home, and when she was about to get out of the car, he pulled her to him and wanted to kiss her. Adriana pushed the new acquaintance away from her and asked indignantly what he was doing. Stephen looked at the girl perplexed and simply replied that he wanted to kiss the now Adriana. She looked at the young man in amazement and mumbled, "Is it customary for you to kiss a girl on the lips on the second day of acquaintance?" "What's wrong with that? But we hardly know each other to kiss already," she said quietly. "If you don't want to, I won't." "Okay, let's say goodbye. I gotta go too. We'll see each other again, of course, but only after a while, because I have to go on a business trip. I'm going to my parents' house in a few days too. You will call me for sure." Soon, Adriana went to her parents' house in the countryside. She stayed there for the winter vacation. During this time, the guy called her on New Year's Eve, and one more time. The girl was worried that her relationship with Stephen might not work out. She had already realized that she had fallen in love with this man with all her heart. Soon Adriana arrived for her studies. At college, she met up with a friend she hadn't spoken to since Stephen had suggested a walk through the pairs. Adriana thought that their conflict with her friend had already passed during the winter break. So without a second thought, she approached Betty and asked how the girl had celebrated New Year's Eve. Betty arrogantly glanced at her classmate and said, "Why are you wondering?" "My time about driving. Although I can tell you that I've had a good time these days. I went out with Stephen a couple times. He should be here tomorrow. By the way, what do you mean you met him?" Adriana asked in bewilderment. "You've gone to the country. So he suggested that we spend some leisure time together, and I didn't refuse." Adriana walked away from Betty in silence. She felt a wave of hatred rising in her soul towards her friend, but not towards the young man. Adriana blamed Betty for everything. She believed that it was her classmate who initiated these meetings. After studying, Adriana hurried to the dormitory. She couldn't wait to call her lover, and as soon as she found herself in the room, she immediately dialed Stephen. And when she heard his voice, she asked when he was coming. The guy was surprised at the girl's call and answered that in 2 days, and Adriana asked the question that worried her the most. "Tell me, why did you go out with me? You like Betty, don't you? You're strange, but I liked you. That's why we went out. Let me come over and we'll talk about it." Soon Stephen arrived in town and he met the girl. He looked at Adriana, who had her head down, looking at her hand. The man asked the girl why she had called earlier with this topic of conversation. Adriana kept silent as she did not want to admit to the guy that she was in love with him. And when Stephen pulled the girl to himself and kissed her passionately on the lips, she did not pull away, because at that moment she realized that if she pushed the men away now, Stephen would just leave and never come back. The guy kissed Adriana for a long time, and then the couple went for a drive around the city. After this meeting, a month passed. During this time, Stephen had already bought an apartment and occasionally met Adriana. The girl was angry that the guy came to her so rarely, and he told her in response that he had an emergency at work and had to stay at the bank a lot. Adriana practically did not communicate with her friend. Betty was calm about it and only occasionally made tricky jokes. That Adriana only needed Stephen for a while. Adriana tried not to react to her former friend's words. But one day, when she again heard a rejoinder in her address from Betty, she could not stand it and replied, "You are all angry that the word did not choose you, but that's not my fault. He made his own choice. Why don't you stop bugging me with your sarcastic remarks? You're silly. Pretty soon you'll be crying that you crossed me. Are you saying you'll still claim my boyfriend knowing I'm dating him? You got that right. And if I have to, I'm not going to play hard to get and jump into bed with him," Betty said with a smirk, and immediately went on her way. Adriana stood in a stupor. From this conversation, the girl suddenly realized that Stephen was talking to Betty, since how could the former friend know that she was denying Stephen intimacy? And at the same moment, Adriana decided that she would call her boyfriend right away and offer him to spend the night together. The girl, not thinking long, dialed the guy and said that she wanted to spend the weekend with a sleepover at his place. The man was stunned by this news and instantly agreed. Soon Adriana was making love to Stephen for the first time, and for the morning. When she woke up, she did not regret her decision. She wanted now every morning to wake up in the arms of her favorite man and hear from him pleasant compliments. After that night, the man came to the girl's dormitory more often and took her to his place for sleepovers. Adriana already thought that soon they would become husband and wife, and so she told her lover, "We have been dating for almost 3 months. Maybe we should think about getting married. I don't really need a stamp in my passport. We're good together, and that's what matters. You know, I have a question for you too. Tell me, what are you ready to do for love for me?" The young woman thought for a moment, and then in all seriousness answered that she was ready to sacrifice everything, but only to be near him. In response to this confession, the guy smiled and said that nothing had to be sacrificed, and immediately hugging the girl said, "I just want you to make a tattoo on your shoulder, descending roses. It really turns me on in bed, but it's up to you to decide if you want to do it or not. And if you agree to it, I'll draw the sketch of the flower myself. I'll do it. In the meantime, you draw the flower." The next day, the girl found out how much the procedure cost, and after that she called her mother to ask her for money. Adriana did not hide from her mother what she was asking for, and honestly said that she wanted to get a tattoo. Her mother responded by saying that it was stupid to disfigure her body with Adriana's pictures. When she heard the refusal, she continued to me, "It is very important to do it the way a loved one asked for it. You got a boyfriend, and you never even mentioned him once on the phone. How did you start living in the city? Did you become secretive? I'm sorry, but I wasn't ready to tell you about my relationship with this man. Now I'm sure of our feelings for each other. I'll tell you all about Stephen. But now you tell me, will you give me the money or not?" The mother said yes to her daughter, and on the same day, Adriana received a transfer from her parents. After a while, the girl visited a salon and made a tattoo on her right shoulder. She proudly showed the picture on her body to her lover. Stephen enthusiastically appreciated the tattoo and told the girl the cherished words that Adriana was dear to him. A month flew by when Adriana, having got up in the morning, felt indisposed. The girl felt nauseous and had a general feeling of weakness. Adriana barely sat through her classes that day, hurrying to the dormitory to lie down. She hoped that she would feel better the next day. However, it didn't happen. Adriana felt an uneasy feeling in her soul, and then it hit her. What if she was pregnant? After her college class, Adriana stopped by the drugstore and bought a test. When she got to her dorm, she went straight to the restroom where she did the procedure as instructed. And then the girl watched with excitement as 2 blue stripes appeared on the litmus paper. Adriana was unspeakably happy about it. After all, now she was carrying a baby from her favorite person under her heart. And this meant that soon Adriana will become the legal spouse of the chosen one. The young woman immediately called her lover and said that she wanted to see him immediately. The man promised the girl that as soon as he was free, he would come. Adriana waited with excitement for the chosen one to tell the glad tidings, and as soon as she saw Stephen, immediately hugged him and in his ear whispered the news about the baby. The man pulled away from the embrace and looked at the girl unhappily. Then he asked what Adriana was going to do about it. The young woman looked at the boy perplexed and said firmly that she was going to give birth. Stephen was a little down after the words of the girl, which did not escape Adriana's attention. And she asked him a question. Are you not happy about it? I don't know how to answer that. It's just that the news was unexpected, and I wasn't ready to hear it. Since you decided to have a baby, we probably need to legalize the relationship so that the baby is born in a complete family, where there is a mom and dad. These are exactly the words I've been waiting to hear from you when you need to introduce me to your mom. And then I'm gonna call my parents and invite them over. And they're gonna rent an apartment here for a couple days. You and I need to get married as soon as possible, before I get a belly. Soon Stephen introduced Adriana to his mother Kathy. Adriana tried to be friendly with her future relative, but she intuitively sensed that the woman didn't like her. Adriana thought to herself that Adriana's mother was probably just not ready for her son to remarry and was therefore a little belligerent toward her. Meanwhile, Kathy began to ask the young couple when they were going to get married. Stephen replied that initially they would wait for Adriana's parents and then they would apply at once. The landlady nodded in response and immediately said, "Son, I won't discourage you from taking this step, but I think you're rushing the wedding. You don't know each other well enough to be a family. But if you've made this decision, I insist that there be no wedding. I just want you to get married without the formal part. Your father and I already spent a lot of money on your first wedding. I wasn't planning on having a big party. I was just going to get married and sit with my relatives in a cafe. And we're in a hurry to apply to the registry office for one reason only. Adriana is expecting a baby. You have a rare young person, as I see," Stephen's mother said coldly and looked at her future daughter-in-law with a piercing look. As soon as Adriana and her chosen one went outside from Kathy, the young woman told the man with annoyance that she would like to have a wedding, not a party. The young woman added that she was getting married for the first time and would like to be in a white dress on that day. Stephen replied that it was only a waste of finances to play a wedding now. The young woman tried to object to the young man, but he interrupted her and said, "You know very well that I have recently purchased real estate. I had savings, but not enough to buy an apartment, so I had to take out a loan from the bank. Now you think about it. How much money are we going to use for the party? Or maybe your parents will give us money to throw a wedding. No, they can't help us because they don't make much money. Then we'll never speak of it again." Soon Adriana called her parents and invited them to come to meet her fiancé. Only the girl's mother came. The woman blessed her daughter and promised that she and her father would already come to the marriage ceremony. Adriana was happy that now her mother is familiar with her favorite person. After a while, the young people filed an application in the registry office. Then the newlyweds celebrated the marriage ceremony in one cozy cafe, where only the closest relatives were present. After Adriana became the legal spouse of Stephen, then she moved to live in her husband's apartment. Time slowly went on. The first half of the pregnancy, the young woman felt good, but when the second mister began, Then the doctor said that she needed to lie in the hospital for preservation. And as a result, Adriana was often in the hospital almost until the birth. The young woman gave birth prematurely, a baby girl, which she and her husband named Christina. While in the hospital, Adriana learned that her daughter had kidney disease. The young woman was very worried about this and asked Our Lady only for the health of her little girl. In connection with the girl's illness, Adriana stayed in the hospital for a long time, and after discharge, the attending doctor immediately said that now it was necessary to carefully monitor her daughter's condition and to act precisely according to the instructions of the medical staff. The young woman, as soon as she found herself at home, realized that she was not ready to cope with maternal duties alone. Adriana approached her husband and asked him to talk to her mom about staying with them for a while. Stephen, after listening to the request, responded by telling Adriana to call on her own. She was offended by her husband's words and told him, "You must be forgetting that Christina is your daughter. You see that the baby cries a lot. And I, because I became a mom for the first time, do not know how to act in this or that situation. You yourself wanted this baby, so you should be ready for all the surprises. There are internet forums and literature. Here, sit and learn how to babysit a baby. And after all, you have your own mother to turn to. But my mom works, and your mom is retired. Okay, I'll talk to my mother-in-law myself." Hiding irritation, said the girl. And in a few minutes, Adriana dialed Kathy's number. As soon as she picked up the phone, the daughter-in-law asked her to come to visit. The pensioner asked what was the purpose. Adriana almost responded by cursing her mother-in-law, but then she pulled herself together and politely said, "Just to check on your granddaughter. And in fact, I would like with you in confidence you can come tomorrow." "I will try," said the interlocutor, and immediately disconnected the connection. Adriana waited all the next day, but her mother-in-law didn't show up. Kathy came only 2 days later. She entered the apartment and glanced at her granddaughter and asked her what her daughter-in-law wanted from her. Adriana did not go around. Yes, she told her that she needed help. She explained that she could not cope with the duck, as the child only in her arms behaves calmly, and she has to do laundry, ironing, and cooking at home. Adriana asked her mother-in-law to come to them at least 3 times a week for 3 hours. Kathy didn't say a word. She listened and then said thoughtfully that she never thought her son would marry a country bumpkin who couldn't be a mother and a good housewife. Adriana felt anger boiling up inside her after her mother-in-law's words. But mentally she forced herself to calm down and said aloud, "I realize you don't like me, but your son made a choice and fell in love with me. And we live together. Soulmate. And I brought you here to ask for help, not to discuss me. Stephen and I are raising your granddaughter. You know, your granddaughter, not some stranger's girl. And that's the only reason I'm asking for your help. I don't need to make any pretty speeches right now. I'm a mother too, and I raised my son without any help from my family. I think you are just lazy as you don't have time to do everything when the baby is sleeping. Your son was not born sick like Stephen and I were, and you didn't have to give medications on a strict schedule. That's one thing. And secondly, our daughter sleeps restlessly if she lies in the crib any rustle, and the baby wakes up. And Christina sleeps serenely only when she is in my arms. And so I just do not have enough time for household chores, as I am always with my daughter in my arms. You don't have to beg me with tears. I can come over twice a week for a couple hours. Now I have to go." Adriana saw her mother-in-law off and breathed a sigh of relief. She was even glad that the old woman would come twice a week, and as soon as her husband arrived, Adriana informed him that she had spoken to his mother, and they had agreed. Stephen nodded in agreement. It had been a month since Kathy had visited Adriana. And then the elderly woman told her sister-in-law that she was leaving for the sanatorium, so she would not come the day after tomorrow. Adriana looked at her mother-in-law in astonishment and was surprised, as there had been no talk about the sanatorium before. Adriana decided not to focus on it and tried to distract herself from these thoughts. A few days passed, and Adriana went out for a walk with her daughter. She wanted a stroller and quietly wrote her daughter. As suddenly stopped digging, the young woman saw her mother-in-law, who was getting out of her car. Kathy did not see her daughter-in-law. She was in a hurry to go to a fashion boutique. Meanwhile, Adriana could not get away from the fact that she had just seen a relative who was supposed to be in a sanatorium. Adriana came home after the walk in a bad mood. She wanted to tell her husband that her mother was a two-faced person, but she could not say anything because her daughter suddenly began to cry. And when Adriana touched the baby's forehead, she realized that the child had a fever. The woman called an ambulance, and she and Christina were hospitalized. As it turned out, subsequently the girl's kidneys made themselves known. Adriana spent a long time with her daughter in the hospital. After discharge, expensive medications were required. The man was angry that so much money was spent on pills and injections. Adriana saw that all this unnerved her loved one and calmed him as much as she could, saying that Christina would soon get better. However, 6 months later, the girl became ill again, and once again Adriana and her daughter went to the hospital. Stephen this time very rarely visited his wife and child. He told his wife that he had a lot of work at the bank. Adriana only sighed bitterly in response. After a while, the young woman and her daughter were discharged. The doctor immediately informed Adriana that surgery would likely be required if a recurrence occurred. Adriana replied that if it had to be done, she and her husband were ready. Time moved on, and Christina had already turned 1.5 years old, and the young woman already thought that the girl's disease had receded forever. But her expectations were not justified, as her daughter became ill again. And here is another hospitalization. This time Adriana already knew that there would be an operation and was ready for it. Soon the girl was operated. The doctor immediately informed the mother that now it will be necessary to go through a long rehabilitation period. The medic, after the discharge of the child, gave the woman a full list of instructions, how the daughter should be cared for. Adriana with Christina returned home. The girl was glad that now the hospital walls are behind her. She really hoped that her daughter would recover completely. And when she and Christina were taken from the hospital by her husband, she said so. Stephen only gave her husband a sullen look after these words. Life went on from there. Adriana tried to be a model wife and always welcomed her husband home from work. However, Adriana began to notice that lately her husband was often late at the bank. And it was also suspicious that Stephen, who was not a fan of nightclubs, suddenly became a regular. The woman tried to talk to her husband on the subject, but he replied, as soon as the conversation on the subject came up, that this way he relieves stress. After work, and lately Adriana has noticed another oddity in the behavior of her spouse. When her husband gets a phone call, he often goes out to talk on the stairwell. Woman, it seems suspicious. And when once again Stephen called and he went out, she quietly followed her chosen one. Adriana looked through the peephole and saw that her lover was standing with his back to her and talking to someone. Adriana opened the door a little and listened. Immediately, she heard her husband saying, "Shalva is not mine. I miss you too." As soon as Adriana heard this phrase, she was like an electric shock. She jerked the door open and looked angrily at her spouse. The man turned around and immediately assessed the situation. Stephen asked his spouse to come into the apartment and not to make a fight here. Adriana forced herself to do it, and as soon as her husband followed her into the hallway, she turned to him and wanted to slap him. But Stephen managed to intercept her hand, saying, "You're behaving like a country woman. Didn't you realize earlier that I had a woman on the side? We're civilized people and have a right to privacy. Are you saying that I can have a lover and go to him and have a good night out? You can't, as you're the one who has to keep the family home safe. And I, for your information, am the only one who brings money into our budget. And you're giving me a hard time about it. As soon as Christina turns 3, I'm going to go to work. It's only a couple months away. Don't talk nonsense. Where are you going to work if you haven't finished college? How about selling vegetables at the market? I won't let that happen. I don't need someone pointing a finger at me and telling me that a respectable banker's wife is a slave trader. I don't understand you, but you accused me of cheating. What's the big deal? I was expecting you to have the city permit. I support you and your daughter. I don't have to take your pathetic allowance into account because it's only enough for your medication. I don't beat you like other husbands do and keep you up all night. What else do you want? But you have a mistress. And for your information, I don't want to share you with any woman. If you don't hear me now, I will. With tears shouted the young woman and rushed to the kitchen, and after a few minutes returned back, presenting a knife to her wrist. Adriana did not say anything at that moment, but only looked at her husband, who realized from the look on his wife's face that she would do what she had planned. Stephen smiled gently at his wife and asked her to put down the cold weapon. And then the head of the family said that at this time they had overreacted. It is necessary to calm down and talk. The man, after these words, approached his wife and took the knife from her hands. Then he hugged her bare shoulder and gently kissed her where the tattoo was. The woman cried and snuggled into her husband's chest. Stephen stroked his wife's hair and asked her to stop shedding tears. Suddenly, the landlord lifted the face of the chosen one and said that he had an idea. Adriana, with tears in her eyes, she asked, "What do you want to propose?" "You should go to the village to your parents. You and Christina at least a little air and not be gassed by the air. It would do our daughter good. Especially you said yourself that soon we'll register for kindergarten, and she needs to gain strength before that. And where to do that? Not in the country. I'll think of something about your labor activity." Adriana listened to her husband's proposal in suspense and then exclaimed with indignation that Stephen had chosen her on purpose. She lived in the village so that she could have fun with other women. As if the man was ready for these words, so he hugged his wife again and gently in her ear said, "Do not talk nonsense. I'll even stay with you in the village for a few days. You and I are radically changing our lives for the better. I will not have any more trips to the side." "Did you mean it just now?" "Of course I mean it. Go ahead, call your mother and tell her you're coming soon. I'll take a few days off work tomorrow." Soon Adriana and her husband and daughter were in the village. Stephen stayed with his mother-in-law for 3 days and then returned to the city. When leaving, the man told his spouse that he would call every day. Adriana anxiously accompanied her beloved home. She was afraid that he would start seeing his mistress again. However, Stephen, as promised, called his wife every day and asked how she and her daughter spent their time. A month and a half had passed since Adriana had been living in the village with her daughter. The young woman missed her husband very much. And so, when he called and said that he was going home, Stephen did not particularly welcome his wife's decision, said that it would be possible to stay in the village longer. But Adriana refused and resolutely said, "If you do not come for us, in 2 days we will go ourselves with Christina." "No need, I will take you," replied the head of the family. 2 months had passed since Adriana had returned with her daughter from the village. During this time, they celebrated her birthday. Christina enrolled the girl in kindergarten. Stephen continued to work at the bank, and Adriana took care of household chores. Soon the young woman was bored with everyday life, and she turned to her husband. "You promised me a job. Isn't it time to do it? Is it bad for you to stay at home? I'm bored. I feel like a dependent." "Okay, I'll look into it one of these days." Adriana, after her husband's answer, hugged him and rejoiced in her heart. The woman piously believed that now there was a white streak in their family, and there would be no more sorrow. However, she was mistaken, because 2 weeks after this conversation, her daughter fell ill, and the girl was taken straight from kindergarten to the hospital. Christina's right kidney, Adriana, fell ill. After learning all the details from the doctor, she couldn't believe that her girl was back in the hospital bed. The woman questioned the doctor. How is this possible? After all, Christina had undergone surgery on this organ. The doctor answered the girl's mother using medical terms, and Adriana understood almost nothing from the words of the doctor. The woman was worried about her daughter's condition, And it was doubly hard for her when she visited Christina and the girl asked not to leave her alone. Adriana tried to explain to the child that the doctor wanted to help her, but could do it only in the hospital. The daughter, though, listened to her mother's words, but still asked her mother to stay with her again. The young woman realized that it was simply impossible to explain to her 3-year-old daughter to stay in the hospital. And once again, when Adriana came to visit Christina, the girl whimpered and began to ask to go home. The young woman, as before, began to soothe the child. She herself could hardly hold back her tears. This dialogue was observed by the post-nurse, who approached Adriana and said, "I understand you very well, how hard it is for you. I can only help in one way. When there will be my night shift, I will allow you to sleep with the girl in the room. I'll warn you that you'll have to sleep on a chair or a couch. But I'll do chairs in the hallway or even on the floor. How much do I owe you for this?" The nurse did not answer, but only smiled. Adriana immediately went to her daughter and told her that she would spend the night with her, but not every day. The little girl clapped her hands joyfully. And the mother at that moment thought how little a child needs for joy. Adriana. Now once every 4 days she slept over at her daughter's house. All other days the young woman was also at the hospital with Christina during the day. Adriana gave herself completely to caring for the girl. What was the use of a spouse who had taken a mistress? The woman found out about it by accident. It happened as follows. Adriana, as always, went to a sleepover with her daughter. But it turned out that the nurse was sick and was replaced by another nurse. Adriana tried to persuade the girl in the white coat to let her stay with Christina until morning. But the nurse replied that she had no right to do so and did not want to be reprimanded for making such a decision arbitrarily. Adriana had nothing left to do but to go home. The young woman quietly opened the door to the apartment and heard a woman's laughter. Adriana stopped like a halt. She listened and immediately recognized the guest's voice. It was her former college friend, who said it would be nice to be with you all the time and enjoy making love. "But that's what we do with you," in an excited voice, Stephen replied. Adriana didn't wait for Betty's reply and flashed into the living room where the couple was. Sitting on the couch in an embrace, Adriana threw herself at her rival, intending to claw at her hair. She was not allowed to do this. Spouse, who instantly oriented the man, hugged his beloved, and asked him to calm down. The young woman tried to break free, screaming that she was about to be torn to shreds by this mistress. Then Stephen commanded Betty, "Pack up and leave. We'll take care of this ourselves." The guest, smiling wryly, got up from the couch and sent a kiss to her former friend and went into the hallway. A few minutes later, the couple only heard the front door slam. Only after that, Stephen let go of his wife, who looked at him angrily. Adriana only wanted to shout hurtful phrases to her husband, but he beat her to it. "Pull yourself together. What did you want? You're always ending up in hospitals. You don't care about me. And I, too, need care and a woman's affection." That's what I found with Betty. So while I take care of my sick daughter and have fun, so like she's begging you for expensive medication, and you can afford champagne, which costs a lot of money. How am I supposed to understand you? I give all of myself only to you and my daughter, and you're saving me such a pig. I'm asking you, let's not use big words and mutual insults. It's just that I've already explained to you that I lacked female attention. Now I'll give you a woman's attention." In hysterics, said the young woman and rushed to the window, which opened wide. Adriana quickly climbed on the windowsill and fervently said, "If you lack attention, you will have it. I'm about to step off the 3rd floor and you'll be alone with your daughter. That's when you will have attention, because Christina will stay with you and you will have to take care of her. And if you fulfill your fatherly duties well, our daughter will provide you with care in your old age. Then you'll have a woman's attention in your old age. Think of your daughter. Why do you only care about yourself?" The man said, and made a step towards his wife. And at the same moment he heard the exasperated voice of his wife. "Stay away. We need to clarify the relationship once and for all. You have to promise to stop going to women. You know very well that I can do this deed at this moment." The man saw that his wife was in a hysterical state, and Stephen decided that now was not the best occasion to clarify the relationship. So he constantly apologized to his beloved and got down on one knee in front of Adriana, quietly saying, "Come down. I only now realized how much we love each other, and also realized that how much grief I'd brought you in this life. I'm sorry." Adriana looked incredulously at her lover, who continued to speak beautiful words. The young woman distrustfully stretched out her hands to him, and the man hurriedly removed his wife from the windowsill. He promised that he would have no more liaisons with women on the side. Adriana, hearing Stephen give her his word, immediately cried out, "And you already promised me that. What happened in the end? I find you alone with Betty. I told you it wouldn't happen again. Let's talk about your daughter. Tell me how she's doing." As soon as they talked about the girl, Adriana forgot about what had happened here the other day. The young woman told her that she had not been able to stay with her daughter for the night, and immediately told her that there was good news. Adriana said that Christina would be discharged in 2 days. The man, after his wife's words, hugged her and noted that the latest news is joyful. Soon the girl was discharged. Adriana put her daughter back in daycare and reminded her husband about the conversation about work. A few days passed after Christina was discharged, and Adriana noticed that her spouse was now dropping calls when called, and after a while would lock himself in the bathroom with the phone. Adriana had a woman's intuition that her husband was doing this for a reason. He clearly continues to communicate with Betty even though he doesn't see her, as the chosen one was on time from work. Adriana realized that there was no point in talking to her husband about his communication with his ex-girlfriend, and the girl decided that it was worth talking to her mother-in-law about it. Adriana took her daughter to kindergarten in the morning and immediately went to Stephen's mother. Kathy met her daughter-in-law warily, as the daughter-in-law rarely showed up unannounced. The landlady invited her into the hall and asked what had brought Adriana to visit. The young woman did not go around and around, but said straight away, "Your son is cheating on me. I'd like you to influence Stephen. I've spoken to him several times, but our conversation is going nowhere. Stephen keeps looking at other women. I wonder about that in particular." With a chuckle, Kathy said, and immediately continued, "If my son is not satisfied, how can I influence him? I see only one way out. You need to divorce, and the whole problem will be solved." "What do you mean, divorce? Stephen and I have a child together. Besides, my daughter's not in good health. And on top of all that, I love my husband. Stephen is now in a relationship with an ex-girlfriend of mine. And believe me, she has no interest in your son. Betty is just trying to get back at me because Stephen chose me over her. All I'm asking you to do is talk to your son, because his family is falling apart. I know Stephen listens to your word. Everything you've told me hasn't touched me in the slightest. But for my part, I promise I'll talk to my son. I think this is the end of our conversation, because I have to go to the tourist center. By the way, I wanted to tell you that you should go to the gym too, since you have some extra pounds that don't look good on you." Adriana did not reply to her mother-in-law's barbs. The young woman hurried to leave Kathy's apartment. Adriana thought that a conversation between mother and son would at least change the situation, and perhaps after a dialogue with her mother, her husband would stop communicating with Betty. In the meantime, Kathy, 2 days after the arrival of her daughter-in-law, called her son and asked him to come alone. Stephen complied with his mother's request, and in the evening, having warned his wife that he would be late, went to his mother. And now the man sits opposite his mother in the living room and looks at her questioningly. The elderly woman smiled at her son and asked how his family relations were. Stephen shrugged and mumbled that it wasn't bad. And at the same moment, Kathy sternly mumbled that she would like to know the true answer. And at once added the daughter-in-law, "The other day she complained to me that you were truanting. Tell me, why should I listen to this from the village Lockhorns? I don't know why she came to you. I'm not seeing anyone at the moment, and I'm tired of it all. Of what exactly? The landlady asked calmly. I'm tired of the constant whims of my daughter. I realize that she is sick, but I cannot bear to hear often her crying. I'm sick and tired of my wife constantly controlling my every move. You know very well I like variety, and I've been known to go out on the side. But she knew that when she got married. Now she wants a model family man who admires only her. If things are so bad, why don't you just get a divorce? Make her choose. Either Adriana accepts you for who you are, or you work things out and live each on your own. It's so easy for you to talk about it. I've thought about it before and even said I was entitled to my own space. So she started scaring me about taking her own life. The man said irritably and rubbed his temples nervously with his palms. It is possible that your spouse is manipulating you with such actions. They are simple threats to make you live by her rules. Women often use such tricks, but they don't really mean to take their own lives. Mom, did you see her when she grabbed the knife? One more careless word from me and Adriana would have carried out her threat. And to test the fate of a wife who would or would not do such a thing. I have no desire to do so. Imagine her throwing herself out of a window in front of me. How would I live with that for the rest of my life? I'm in a vicious circle and I don't know how to get out of it. I just don't have the energy. Okay, well, don't lose heart. I'll think about what to do about the situation. After talking to his mother, Stephen went home, where Adriana was waiting for him. The girl immediately, as soon as she saw her husband, asked why he went to Kathy. The head of the family did not talk about the topic of the conversation and lied to the chosen one that his mother asked him to come to fix the plumbing. Adriana immediately hinted that the lover lied, since in such cases the mother-in-law always called the master. They invited her son to help. Several days passed. Adriana still saw that Stephen continued to communicate with the former girlfriend, and she gave him a scandal, reminding him that he would kill himself if he did not stop behaving like that. The man, barely containing his irritation, explained to his wife that Betty herself was calling him and asking to talk to her. Adriana offered to let her talk to Betty herself. Stephen only wanted to answer the chosen one. His mother called and asked him to come over. The head of the family, after a short conversation with his mom, said that yes, they are talking on the subject. As soon as he returns from Kathy, Adriana, before leaving, asked what was the occasion for which his mother called him. At this late hour, the man pronounced that he did not know and would tell her when he returned. Soon Stephen was at his mother's house and told her about the altercation with his wife. The man told it all in an irritated tone. Kathy could see that his son really couldn't bear to live like this. The older woman shook her head and said, I have an idea. Your wife is afraid of losing you. Perhaps she really loves you with some special love, that she is ready to stop living if you are not around. But you can send your spouse to a remote village where there is no cell phone service for a while, ostensibly to heal the daughter, but only for a long time. And it is quite possible that she will meet a man there with whom she will fall in love. This is not a solution, as I sent her to the village to her parents. She lived there for a month and a half and dreamed, and only about me. With bitterness, replied the son, wait to immediately cancel this option, which I suggested. First, when Adriana was at her parents', there was a connection, and we called every day, not letting each other forget about themselves. And secondly, she was only away for a month and a half, and in my case, I proposed to take her to the middle of nowhere for 6 months, while inventing a fairy tale for her. The conspirator mumbled Kathy and looked at his son with a testing look. The man hesitated. The landlady did not hurry him. She realized that Stephen had to think things over carefully to make a decision. About 20 minutes passed before Stephen spoke. He said to his mother, perhaps there is truth in what you say, and it is worth the risk of doing something like this. But where would I find such a place? And then how can I persuade Adriana to go there? After all, she will think that I live on her right side on purpose, so that I can have fun in my absence. On the subject of persuasion, Then here is my motherly advice to you. For a start, become for a time approximately husband, at least for a month. Give Adriana gifts. Pay as much attention to your daughter as you can. You have to put your spouse's attention to sleep so that she believes that there is harmony in the family again. And by no means even socialize with yourselves. Tell them you're in the middle of a divorce so they won't bug you for a while. Now, as to where to find such a place, I think the ideal would be to take your spouse to a remote village where there is no communication, but there is a witch doctor. This way, you'll kill two birds with one stone. On the one hand, maybe this nickname will cure Christina, and on the other hand, you'll probably achieve a painless divorce. And if it doesn't work, barely audible, said Stephen, then you will live and be happy with your Adriana, whom you chose to marry. You have no other option how to act in this situation. So do it. Stephen thanked his mother for her cooperation and was about to leave. Just then, he remembered that he had promised his wife to tell her why he had called his mother to his house. Kathy laughed and said that her son was still an unreasonable child, although he often changed partners. And then the older woman added that Adriana had to tell part of the truth. The man looked at his mother with incomprehension, who said, "Tell her that you had an explanatory talk with you about the fact that you do not devote enough time to your family, and also scolded you about cheating. Let Adriana think I'm on her side. Now go with God to your beloved." Stephen soon arrived home and was immediately approached by his wife about his trip to his mother. The man told his wife as Kathy had advised, and the head of the household instantly caught the mood of his wife, who was amused. Stephen thought to himself what a wise mother he had. Adriana, in turn, mentally thanked her mother-in-law that she did not stand aside and stood up for her. Time moved forward unhurriedly. Adriana could not enjoy family life. Her husband often began to say compliments to her, tried to help with household chores, often played with his daughter, which was previously very rare. All these changes in the behavior of the spouse caused enthusiastic Adriana, and she decided to thank her mother-in-law for her help. The young woman bought a bouquet of flowers and a small cake. Then she called Mother Stephen and asked permission to come over. Kathy said in a unified voice that it was not necessary to warn her about her visit, and she could come whenever she wanted. And a short time later, Adriana was sitting at her mother-in-law's house, saying thank you to the landlady. The elderly woman listened to her daughter-in-law and realized that her son had done the right thing, as the daughter-in-law believed that her spouse had completely changed. And as soon as Adriana stopped talking, the mother-in-law uttered, "I am glad that you are doing well. Now you and your husband need to work on your daughter's health. Maybe find a healer. A lot of people are turning to them these days. You know, my husband just told me that the day before yesterday. You must have told him that, right?" "Yes," Stephen called and we talked about it. "But you're a mother, and you're the only one who can make that decision. I would do anything for my daughter's health. Thank you again for everything. I can't believe we're having this kind conversation right now." Soon, Adriana returned home. She was anxiously awaiting her husband's return. And as soon as Stephen appeared in the apartment, she told him about her visit to her mother-in-law. The head of the family hugged her husband and said that he had made some inquiries and found a healer who lived in a remote village. Adriana looked at her husband with interest and asked him to tell about this healer. The husband sat down in a chair and said that in one village there lived an old man who helped people, but he had to live with him for a while to get rid of the disease. And the man added that there are rumors about this healer that he cures even hopelessly ill people. The girl, hearing this, smiled happily and told her husband that it was necessary to go to this healer. The husband was satisfied, nodded and replied that tomorrow he would contact this grandfather. A day later, Stephen said that he had to go to the old man's village to make arrangements for the healer to see them. Adriana sadly asked the chosen one whether it was impossible to call this man. The head of the family said that there was no connection where the old man lived. There was nothing left for the girl to do but to accept her husband's decision. It was 3 days before Stephen left for the country, and now he had returned home. The man told his wife that the healer was waiting for them. The woman asked how long she would be in the wilderness. Stephen replied that the healer would give her the exact answer. But the same man warned her that it would be at least 2 months for sure. Adriana became upset after these words. This was noticed by the head of the family and asked why she became sad. The girl replied, "We will be with you in separation, and I will not even hear your voice. Think not about that now, but about the fact that we will cure Christina, and you're gonna hear my voice every day. I'm gonna record your speech for you, but you'll get that tape when you're already living at Grandpa's house." Wow, that's a great idea. Now get your things together. We're gonna have to leave soon. You know, it's a good thing we decided to send you and your daughter to this healer over the summer. A few days later, Adriana, her husband and daughter were on their way by car to the village. The woman dreamed of only one thing. That time would fly by, and she would return home with a healthy daughter, and she and her husband would never be separated for such a long period of time again. And Stephen mentally thanked fate that everything was going so smoothly. Soon the car pulled onto the village roads and raced over the bumps. The man mentally thanked that he had to drive on such a broken road. The wife saw that her husband resented it and tried her best to calm him down. After a while, the car entered a small village. Stephen stopped at an extreme hut and asked his wife to stay in the car. He himself got out of the car. Stephen approached the house where he was chopping wood. There was a man in the yard. Adriana's husband approached the stranger. "Hello, sir. We're looking for Christopher. Where can we find him?" "Strangers. You can tell you've come to see him for treatment, but he's not here. It's Thursday, which is the day he goes into town every 2 weeks to get supplies. Today's the day. Can you tell me where his house is? You can tell he's not from around here. He has an old hut here, but he doesn't live here much. Christopher lives in the woods. He's a woodsman and a wanderer in one. Help me get my wife and child there. Christopher knows we're coming. A friend of mine arranged it, but he forgot to tell me that on Thursdays the healer goes into town. And I'll pay you well for this favor. I just don't have time to wait here for a healer. There's plenty of work to do in town. Well, if you pay me, that's good, but you can't get there by car. It's a boat ride down the river. And believe me, that's a lot of gasoline. And I'll tell you right away, I'm not going to wait there for long. I'll just take you back to the village. I've got a lot to do too. I can see that. I'll pay for the gas too. But please do not say anything unnecessary to my wife for this additional payment." The interlocutor looked at Stephen suspiciously and nodded his head. And then the man told him to wait for a while. In the meantime, Stephen went to the car, took out his things, and asked his spouse to get out of the car, explaining to her that they would now drive the motor. Adriana was surprised and wanted to ask him some questions, but he firmly replied that it was not the time to talk. 15 minutes later, the woman and her child were already getting into the motor. Stephen immediately warned that the wigs would not go as he was seasick. Adriana asked her husband in farewell when he would eat them. The head of the household replied that he would arrive here in a month and live here for a week. This message from her husband cheered up the woman's spirits, and she sent him an air kiss. Soon the motor was pumping away from the shore. The woman clasped her daughter to her side and regarded a glimpse of the scenery. She thought about the fact that she would have to spend so much time without the person she loved. The thought made her sad, but the woman tried to shift her attention to the fact that her daughter's health depended on this trip. How long the boat ride Adriana didn't clock, but she felt that her legs had already clocked up. That's when the woman asked the man how much farther to the destination. The counselor replied that one more turn and they would arrive, and already Adriana and her child had landed on dry land. The man pointed to a tube and said that it was necessary to go up on a hill and there would be a healer's hut. Adriana bewilderedly asked the stranger if he would help her carry her things up to the hut. The man nodded reluctantly, picked up the bag and the child's backpack, and walked down the path. And the woman followed him, leading the child by the hand. As soon as they climbed the hillside, the girl saw an unassuming cabin. Then a sheepdog ran up to them and started barking loudly at her. Adriana was frightened and clung to her daughter, who was already crying with fear. The man softly said flatulence to the dog. "Ugh, don't scare the guests." And after these words turned to his companion. "I will lead you into the house, and you will wait there. I don't have time to stay here. I've got a lot to do, and it's a long way home, as you've already noticed. Don't be afraid of the dog. The dog is smart." In a few minutes, the woman and the child were already in the hut. Adriana looked around the house and thought that this was where she would have to spend 2 months, maybe more. The woman was a little stunned. So since she thought she would be living in the village, but it turned out to be in the middle of nowhere. It was already evening when Adriana heard the sound of a motor. She realized that Christopher had arrived. The young woman mentally prepared herself for the meeting with the healer. As soon as the man entered the hut, the girl immediately said hello. The grandfather looked at the guest and not friendly asked what she was doing here. Adriana was confused by this question and inarticulately said that there was an agreement about her arrival. Christopher lit a makeshift lamp, illuminated the woman's face, and then said sternly, "And with whom I wondered that I will have a young person, and even with a child. You are doctors, the hotel, and my husband recently came to you to help us cure our daughter. He said he'd have to stay here for a while, and that's the instruction you gave him. That's the most heresy I've ever heard in my life. All right, I can see the raid already. You're not getting out of the house. You're gonna be here till morning, and then you're gonna show me all of your daughter's medical records. I'll see if there's anything I can do to help, and then we'll decide what to do with you. One more thing, nobody made any arrangements with me about you. Now I'll quickly prepare dinner, then we'll put the baby to bed, and you'll tell me everything in detail. But maybe my friend made arrangements with you through an acquaintance, not directly." With tears in her eyes, said the woman, "I have already explained to you that I did not have such a conversation on this topic. Let's understand everything a little later." After these words, the man began to sort out the products that he brought from the city. And then he made a small fire outside, where he piled sausages and potatoes on a frying pan. And after that, Christopher invited the woman and her daughter to have dinner. Soon Christina was put to bed, and the elderly man asked to tell how the woman found herself here. He listened to the guest's story and began to clarify what Stephen had said about him. Then he asked the grandfather a few questions that interested him. "Tell me, my dear, if your husband had made an arrangement with me about you, why did I not meet you then? And also, why didn't your husband himself bring you here and wait for me? I don't know. Perhaps you had urgent business and had to leave, and he didn't come here because he's been seasick since childhood. Don't you find your own answers funny? What do you want me to say? I don't understand what's going on." Crying bitterly, the young woman said, "Calm down." The grandfather whispered further, so that Adriana would not hear. "But it seems to me that I understand everything." The next morning, the old man got up very early. He went to the lake, which was not far from the hut. The grandfather caught fish and boiled some soup, and then went to wake up the woman and the child. Christopher entered the house in a cheerful voice and said that it was time to get up and have breakfast. Adriana did not immediately realize when she woke up. Where was she? The woman looked around confused and immediately remembered yesterday. Adriana wished the healer a good morning and hurried to her daughter, who had already opened her eyes. The elderly man offered to wash her face, guessed from standing water in a bucket, and invited to breakfast. As soon as everyone had eaten, the forester asked for medical documents. He studied them for a long time, and then said that there was hope for recovery, but the treatment needed to be done in stages. Adriana looked fearfully at Christopher and told him how long it would take. The interlocutor, smiling, replied that it would take at least 6 months. The woman shrieked and said, "We can't stay in this wilderness without civilization for so long. There are no necessary conditions for a small child to live here, and I am not forcing you to live here. You have to make your own decision. Do you want your daughter to get well or not?" That's up to you. I can tell you this about the conditions. During the war, people lived in worse conditions, and mothers would do anything to cure their children. But I have a husband who will worry about me. With tears in her eyes, said the woman. Husband said, come on, tell me about your life with him, while I prepare a potion of herbs. For your daughter, only one agreement, that you tell the truth and without any exaggerations. The woman lowered her head and began her story in a quiet voice. The man, meanwhile, was pulling out various pouches from the right basket, which he spread out on a makeshift section on the board. From the outside, it might have seemed that the healer was only busy with his work, but it was not so. Christopher listened attentively to the girl, and as soon as she was silent, said, you know what I'll tell you, dearie. It will sound harsh, but it's true. Your whole life with this Stephen is a misunderstanding. And believe me, you're only here because your husband didn't know how to get rid of you. So when he found out I was helping people, he decided to keep you here. I can even say that your husband is not a stupid man, because he chose a village where there is no communication, so that in the near future you could not contact him. I don't believe that. Stephen and I have an excellent relationship lately. I've even made contact with my mother-in-law, even though I thought it would be impossible. She exclaimed in a passionate tone. Maybe it can't. And your mother-in-law just has a cunning mind. Well, I will not argue with you. I can offer you only one option to live here for a month. I'll be tutoring your daughter during that time. And you wait for your husband, who said he'd visit you. Then we'll see which one of us was right in our speculation. It's up to you. You tell me to take you now. I'll do it, no problem. The woman thought for a moment, and then realized that there was some truth in Christopher's words. She agreed to the older man's proposal and immediately asked what she had to do. The man laughed in response and said that the only thing she would be required to do was to cook. And if there is a desire, then watch over the vegetable garden. The girl looked at the forester in amazement and asked a question, do you have a vegetable garden here? Of course, I live here almost all the time. I only go to the village on Saturday with an overnight stay to receive the sick who occasionally come there. Now I'm going, and I'll show you my grounds. It had been a week since Adriana and her daughter, living in the forest wilderness. The woman tried not to think that her husband could have acted in the way the witch doctor had written. She thought there had been a misunderstanding. It even occurred to her that her husband had simply mistaken the healer and brought her to the wrong person. Adriana waited until a month had passed, and she had traveled to the village to see her husband. The week before she met Stephen, her grandfather did not arrive from the village alone. Adriana and Christina watched Christopher walk out onto dry land. In doing so, he pulled the goat behind him on a rope. This scene made the girl and the woman laugh. They watched as the old man tried to pull the animal onto dry land. It turned out, while doing so, it bumps and vomits loudly. As soon as the elderly man managed to do it, then he lowered himself to the ground and panting, said, "And I thought that the most stubborn animal is a donkey. Turns out I was wrong. This goat." Adriana asked curiously, "Why climb into this animal?" The old man grinned and answered that he had long dreamed of a goat because the steamy milk is good for people at his age. And then the man added that Christina also needed to consume this product. Adriana marveled at the words of the healer because he had never brought a goat before. And as soon as the girl appeared, he immediately bought the animal and brought it here. A few weeks passed as the woman lived with Christopher. During this time, she learned how to fish, how to milk the goat. The elderly man himself prepared herbal collections that he gave to the girl from day to day. It was exactly 1 month after Adriana separated from her husband, and the woman started talking in the morning about going to the village. The forester did not interrupt and suggested that they set off immediately. Soon Adriana and her daughter and grandfather were already in the village. They came to the only road that went from the town to the village and sat down on a fallen tree. Adriana often climbed up to see her spouse's familiar automobile, but it was still gone. Hour after hour passed. There was already a bus that came here once a day. but there was no Stephen there either. The woman looked dejectedly at the road and intuitively realized that she would not see her husband today. Adriana turned to Christopher. Perhaps my husband had arrived earlier when we were on the road. He must have waited for us, and without waiting, left. I don't know what to do now. If you want to spend the night here in my house, I'll take you back to town tomorrow. But my daughter still has to drink your potion for a month. Maybe in a month we'll sail early to the village, and I'll meet my husband. I'm not sure, she suggested. Have it your way. And now it's time to go to our lair to make it before dark. Time moved on, and another month of Adriana's life in this godforsaken place was approaching. A few days before going to the village, the woman had asked an elderly man why he was dwelling. Here an old man sighed sorrowfully and pronounced that it was a long story. Adriana touched the woodsman's arm and said that she had plenty of time. She asked him to tell her about his life. Christopher made himself comfortable on her and began his story. Christopher was born in a family where his parents worked as doctors, and when he grew up, he also chose the specialty of medicine. But only the young man decided to become a paramedic. He was invited that he would rush in an ambulance to save someone's life. And in a short time, Christopher graduated from the educational institution and got a job. The young man worked a year in an ambulance, and then he got a call. He went to the exit of the patient was a 19-year-old girl, Clara, who had a heart condition. She was rushed to the hospital. As the girl was being wheeled on a gurney to the hospital, Christopher suddenly shook her hand and told her that she would be fine. After this call, several days passed, and the young man could not forget the eyes of that girl, and he decided to visit her. The man easily recognized the ward where the patient was lying and soon stood near the girl's hospital bed with a bag of fruit and a bouquet of flowers. Clara immediately recognized the paramedic and asked him, "What are you doing here?" "I decided to visit the pretty maiden." "Don't say flattering words that you don't believe yourself. In my orphanage, they used to call a lock a lid to my face. They're stupid people who didn't see your beauty." And then Christopher, with the girl's permission, sat down next to her, and they began to talk. Initially, the young man told about himself, and then asked the new acquaintance about her life. She was embarrassed and said that she did not have much information to tell about herself. But Christopher insisted on his own, and the girl said that she did not know her parents, as her mother abandoned her in the maternity hospital. After that, she went to an orphanage, where she spent her childhood and adolescence. And after the state allocated her a one-room apartment, and she then went to medical school. After this visit, Christopher more than once came to the girl, and when she was discharged, he himself took from the hospital. From that time, the young people began to meet a month after meeting. The guy confessed his love and offered his hand and heart. The girl responded with consent. And as soon as the man heard the word beloved, he said, "You are my marriage cap for life, and I won't give you to anyone. But there is one thing. I know that you work part-time as a nurse at night. Well, you're quitting tomorrow. That kind of work is not good for you. You study in the morning and work at night. What do you say, future husband?" Soon the couple applied, and then had a modest wedding. Christopher moved to live with his wife, and the young people began to master family life. At first it was not easy, as there was often not enough money. But the newlyweds tried not to fight about it. And strangely enough, they succeeded. After a while, she graduated from college and got a job as a nurse. And at the same time, Christopher expressed a desire to become a doctor of homeopathy. He entered the institute by correspondence, and after some time acquired a profession, on which he began his labor activity. And at the same moment, he learned that his wife was in a position. For the couple, it was a joyful event. They were already dreaming of a baby. After a while, Slaga gave birth to a healthy baby boy, who was named John. The son grew up a healthy boy to the joy of his parents. When John was 3 years old, he was enrolled in kindergarten. Christopher thought that he was the happiest person because he had a woman he loved and a son he loved, as well as a job that gave him pleasure. As the years went by, when John turned 14 years old, his grandparents passed away suddenly within a year. Christopher then moved with his family to live in his father's apartment. It was decided to rent out the one-room apartment and save the money for a summer house. Some more time passed, and John graduated from school with a silver medal and then entered medical school. The parents of the young man were happy for their son and dreamed that he would become a highly qualified specialist in the future. However, the happiness of the family broke overnight. John began to feel ill when John was studying in the third year. The woman was examined and a brain tumor was added to the heart disease. Christopher, as if was crushed by this diagnosis, but the man in no way showed it to his spouse. Soon she was put in the hospital. She lay there for some time, but the attending physician said that it was better to take the woman to a Moscow clinic. Christopher, having collected his savings, immediately went to the capital. The woman underwent many necessary procedures. A lot of money was spent, but nothing helped. She was getting worse day by day. The son demanded that his father take his mother abroad, and Christopher was already ready for this. He sold his car, as well as the dacha, which had recently been purchased, and was preparing for the trip. As he was approached by his wife, who said, "Don't go abroad. I will not survive this trip. You are a medical professional yourself, and you understand everything. I don't have much time left. It is better to leave these finances, son, and do not get angry at him that he insists on traveling abroad. He's still a young and hot guy. As they say, life doesn't burn him. Don't talk nonsense. We'll get you back on your feet," the man said firmly. "Don't talk about it. Try your own strength to cure me. They say love heals. Maybe you can do it. I just want to spend my last days with you and know that my two favorite men are doing well." Christopher looked at the woman he loved and tears involuntarily ran down his eyes, which he could not stop. He realized that she was telling the truth about the fact that his wife had only a few days to live, but it hurt him that his beloved knew about it. After all, she's a doctor. And Clara, seeing the tears of her husband, quietly said, "Do not mourn for me if I go to the next world, then with a peaceful soul, because we lived a life worthy. You better buy a house somewhere and let me spend the rest of my days there, where you will feed me with healing creatures." "All right, my love, I will." Christopher told his son of his decision. John, when he found out that his father was going to go to the backwoods instead of abroad, was furious. They had a big fight between them, and in the meantime, Christopher quit his job, and he was already the head of the hospital there. And then he found a small village where he bought a small house and moved there with his wife. The woman lived in the village for a little over 6 months. Christopher prepared a potion for his wife, but realized that it was all useless. And often at night, when the chosen one fell asleep restless son, he went out into the yard and quietly whimpered because he could not change the situation. Died in the early morning, but before that the woman managed to say that she loved her son and Christopher very much, and also asked her husband to bury her in this area. She said it was beautiful and easy to breathe. After these words, she took a deep breath and fell asleep forever. Christopher fulfilled his wife's request and stayed here for good. He did not want to leave his native and beloved man alone after 2 years, as he did not become a wife. A man in the city learned the courses of a forester and got a job in the forestry, having moved into the wilderness. After this story, Christopher looked at Adriana, who was sitting, breathless, and tears were streaming down her face. It was as if the young woman could feel how this older man had gone to any lengths to be with his beloved forever. The forester touched Adriana's arm and looked at her carefully. The girl did not know what to say to this man, nor could she, since there was a lump in her throat. Christopher patted Adriana's hand and said that the time was late and it was time to go to bed. A few days passed, and Adriana and her grandfather and Christina went to the village again. The woman did not really hope to see her husband again. She didn't understand why she felt this way. The forester's story kept replaying in her mind, and Adriana involuntarily thought that it was Christopher's story that prevented her from believing that her husband would appear before she got into the motor. The girl suddenly inquired of the elderly man, does the son know that it was Clara who wished to settle in the village? The grandfather looked sadly at Adriana and shook his head negatively. And then he heard another question from the woman he was talking to. How often do you see John? We parted in an uneasy relationship. I've lived here for almost 12 years now. And in that time, John has been twice. Every fourth year, he comes for 3 days. My son told me himself that he would come every 4 years. Why that number? I don't know. He's supposed to come next summer. Soon the man, woman, and child were already in the village and sitting in the tree again. Adriana did not jump up to see if a car was coming along the road. Then a man passed by them who was taking Adriana and her daughter to the place where the healer lived. The girl told this to Christopher, who immediately stopped the fellow villager and said, do you not remember? Prokopovich took this person with a child to me a couple of months ago. I remember, of course. What happened? Tell me how he acted. I can voice it in front of the young lady. You're not sure? Asked Lawson. You can, and you should. Adriana said boldly. He was a strange guy. He paid double cab fare and told me not to say anything to his wife. I thought he was coming with us to take his wife to her destination. He's got some kind of seasickness thing going on. Any reasonable man wouldn't let a beautiful woman go alone with a stranger. You see what he did, Lawson said. Christopher looked at Adriana, who smiled sadly, and then said that it was time to go back to the goat. And then she added that it was very difficult to milk in the dark. The woman took her daughter by the hand and went first to the river. As soon as they reached the motor, the forester turned Adriana to face him and said, I understand that you have made conclusions for yourself. What are you going to do? Treat my daughter further. You said that 2 months to drink from Varia, and then a month of rest. That's 2 months gone. Now we'll take an active vacation. Trying not to cry, mumbled a young woman. Do you mean that you are ready to live here for a few more months? Of course I am. It's all for my daughter's health. You don't understand. As in your life story. I've had my whole soul ripped out of me. I would have done anything to live with Stephen. I couldn't imagine living without him. And I realize now that he doesn't need me or my daughter. After all, a loving man would have wanted to know how his wife and daughter were living all this time. And here is silence. You left everything for your beloved and came here. You had a prestigious position in the city, surely a good position in society, and you even the desire of the woman you love went to conflict with his own son. And I have nothing to expect from Stephen, since I'm nothing to him. I'm sure this man is now tumbling around with my ex-girlfriend, and he's free to keep it that way. What's important to me right now is to cure Christina, and then we'll see how I move on. You need to think about your decision with a clear head, and they're emotional right now. Now let's go home. It is really uncomfortable to milk in the dark, the old man said in reply. The next morning, Adriana was the first to get up. She went out of the hut and looked at the nature. She liked to contemplate the forest and breathe in the fresh air. And at that time, Christopher approached her quietly and asked her how she had slept last night. The girl turned to the older man and answered that she had slept better than ever. And then the forester asked, now you must decide for sure whether you will stay here or be taken to town. You need to know that now, because very soon summer will be over and fall will come. It can be hard to get out of here. It's often hard to get out here. It rains so hard that the river overflows its banks, and in winter there is a blizzard that you don't want to show your nose from your hut. I told you yesterday I'm staying. You taught me how to fish, and now it's time for me to learn how to hunt. Although I guess it's not really my thing. If you've made up your mind, you're a good girl. Now it's just a matter of building a barn for the goat, making hay, and of course, buying you appropriate clothing for the season. There's something for you in my late car stuff, if you're not squeamish, of course. Christina, on the other hand, will have to buy everything new. Of course, I won't be squeamish. What are you talking about? You know, I feel bad. I don't even have the money to pay for it. Oh, wait a minute. Here's the engagement ring and the gold earrings Stephen gave me. You could pawn all that jewelry and you'd have money. Stop talking nonsense. I have the means. How much do I need on my own? I haven't spent much over the years. I wanted to give it to my son. I gave it to him, and he gave it back to me. So save your gold for a rainy day. Next Thursday, we'll go into town, do a little shopping. We'll get Christina a doll and buy her some books. And I made the Barbie nursery myself. It won't be worse than the store ones. Time flew by. Autumn passed, and then winter came. Adriana enjoyed watching the seasons change, and in each month she found its own charm. What did the latter man often talk about? The elderly man listened to her interlocutor and told her that she had a talent for writing. Because of the way she painted colorfully the seasons, soon it was spring. The man started the vegetable garden. Adriana was helping him with it. Christina also demanded that the adults give her a job. Christopher, in order not to offend the child, gave the girl millet and asked her to pick it. Initially, Christina did it with passion, but soon she got bored with it and demanded a shovel. This statement puzzled the forester, and he promised the child that as soon as Thursday came, he would buy her a children's set of vegetable gardeners and set aside a special place for planting. Spring flew by and summer came. The young woman already realized that it was impossible to stay here forever. In just a couple of years, Christina would have to go to school. Adriana knew that Christopher was thinking about it, too, who had already gotten used to having Adriana and the little girl, whom he loved as his own granddaughter, living next to him. So Adriana decided that it was time to talk to the forester about her return to town. She was going to do it in the morning, but as soon as she got up, she saw that the old man was going shopping. And she damned their news to herself, since she had completely forgotten that it was Thursday and her grandfather was going to town. The elderly man asked what to buy, and the girl quickly wrote a list of groceries, which she held out to Christopher. Soon the forester sailed off to the motor. The woman decided to clean up the hut, the more so her daughter was busy drawing. The girl collected half and raised the floors, then washed everywhere and looked over her work. After that, Adriana began to prepare the first course. She habitually made a fire and put water on the fire in the column. Somehow she heard the roar of a motor. The girl thought that another fisherman went fishing. However, the motor swam to the shore and a middle-aged man came out of it. The stranger looked at the young woman with surprise and asked what she was doing here. Adriana was outraged by this question. And Adriana said, "You are the one who owes me an explanation as to why you came here." "Good acquaintance. Well, I'll start by explaining. I'm here to visit Christopher's father." The young woman stared at the forester's son with all her eyes and then splayed her hands and said loudly, "So you are John," and immediately added sternly, "Good son. He doesn't know what's wrong with his father. And he comes once every 4 years. Wow, I'm getting hit on by a wood nymph. This is a very interesting situation." The man said with a chuckle, "I won't stop you from having fun. Tell the father that his son came," and he opened. John stopped talking as he saw Christina come out of the house. The man was silent for a while, but then he said, "And this is my father, who pretends to be a devoted husband to my mother when he has already made a child." After these words, John turned around and went to the motor. And immediately afterwards I heard, "Such asses as you, it is necessary to search for more. Your father is a golden man who still loves Clara. That's the only reason he lives here and doesn't move to the city. And you should be ashamed of yourself for thinking so badly of your own father." "What did you say? You don't know anything. Dad brought Mom here when the doctors could have helped her." And the man was interrupted at the same moment by Adriana, who said in a calmer voice, "Shut up, ignoramus, and listen to what I'm about to tell you. Your mother knew she was going to die soon, and it was she who persuaded your father to bring her here. I don't know why I kept it from you, Christopher, but I can tell you with certainty that I have never seen such love as that between your parents." And then the young woman was already telling about herself how the couple got here after they learned about each other and remembered their acquaintance and laughed. And then the girl asked what John hadn't said when she interrupted him. The man smiled and said that he wanted to inform his father that he now had his own clinic. And at the same moment, the couple heard a motor pull up, out of which Christopher got out with his bags. The elderly man saw his son and wept, and at the same time, John rushed towards him and began to apologize for being such a stupid man. Soon, Adriana was leaving the forester, but not only in the company of his daughter, but also John. The healer's son promised his father that he would show the girl to specialists and in the near future report on the results of treatment. And as it turned out, healing courage actually helped Christina, since the tests turned out to be good. Several years have passed. During this time, Adriana divorced Stephen and married John. They had a child together. It was a boy who was named Ignat. The couple took turns telling Adriana's parents during the summer and then going to the countryside to visit John's father. Only now Adriana realized that she had met a worthy man whom she loved with all her heart and was confident in him in every way. John felt the same way and often recalled their unusual acquaintance, which had almost turned into enmity. And on one of the days of such memories, Adriana said to her husband, "You know, I really want to go to the city where I started college. That's where Christina was born. And I promised I'd show you those places. What's the big deal? You promised. You keep your promise. We'll go through this town, especially since we're on our way to your parents' house, and then to my father's, right?" Happily said the woman and kissed her spouse on the lips. And soon the family was already driving a jeep in the town where Christina was born. The woman asked her husband to park the car and walk. The man complied with the request of his beloved, and in a few minutes the family was already standing on the street. Adriana corrected her sundress. Unshaven, took Christina under the arm and offered to walk. John took the 4-year-old son by the hand, and they slowly headed down the street. Just then, Adriana heard a loud exclamation, to which she turned around. The woman looked at the man and recognized him as her ex-spouse. She coldly rolled her eyes at him and wanted to continue on her way. But Stephen exclaimed that he was glad for the unexpected meeting and began showering Adriana with compliments and said that he recognized Adriana only by the tattoos she had made for him, and then pointed at Christina and asked, "This is my daughter. Hear that, banker? At one time you took your wife's bored child to the middle of nowhere and left for a mistress. And now, years later, when there was a chance meeting, you decided to pretend to be a father. That's not gonna happen. Christina has been calling my husband, who is standing next to me, Daddy for a long time. And about the tattoo, thank you for reminding me to look at it soon. Now go on your way and forget about us forever."